Mushoku Tensei Vol13 by Rifujin Note, cast by Ardtail Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audio drama like this, please visit ardtail.ai and use promotion code ardtail to activate your account. Now, enjoy the story. One morning, I was roused from slumber by the most delicious of smells. It had wafted into my nostrils as I slept, filling my heart with warm and wonderful emotions. What? Startled by this alluring aroma, I snapped my eyes open and found a goddess in bed next to me, sound asleep. Her cherubic face was inches from my eyes. I could even hear her breathing softly through her charming little nose. Ooh. I slowly emerged from beneath the blanket and then rose to my knees as quietly as I could. Putting my hands together, I offered her a brief gesture of supplication. There was a holy personage in my bed. It was only natural that I show her deference. Wait a minute. Could this mean? With shaking hands, I reached out to pull back the blanket from atop the goddess. It was just as I'd hoped. Astonishing as it may seem, her entire body had manifested next to me. Ooh! Her figure was slender and deceptively youthful in appearance, lacking curves in certain places where they might usually be expected. It was too dark to see clearly, but was that dot I saw on her chest a divine symbol, perhaps? An auspicious mark? Meant to represent her third eye? No, probably not. Still, it was something no less holy. Would it be permissible for me to touch her? Surely I had the heaven's implicit blessing. The goddess had come to me after all. I was the chosen one, the Messiah, and surely a Messiah is allowed to touch his God. But was it permissible for me to do so while her spirit was roving elsewhere? There was a risk that I would burden my soul with sin and bar myself from the gates of nirvana. The moment I reached out my hand, she might flood the room with brilliant light, shout, "Begone, foul Mara," and purify me into nothingness. What a cruel dilemma. I couldn't help it if my little apostle was feeling particularly fervent this morning. The goddess grabbed blindly for the blanket, pulled it back over her, and then turned on her other side. Ooh! How truly wondrous! I could see the white nape of her neck peeking from beneath her blue hair. I could see the hickeys I'd left there yesterday. Truly splendid. Surely I was the luckiest man in the world to be offered such spectacular sights the very moment I awakened. Oh, right. We don't have that much time in the morning, do we? Better get her up. Roxy, wake up. It's morning. My goddess opened her eyes and slowly sat up. The blanket slipped away as she did so, revealing her lovely naked back. This was the dawn of a new age.
Good morning.
Sluggishly, she turned around to face me, eyes fogged with sleep. She had 2 auspicious marks on her chest and a cute little belly button down below them. And then there were her panties, which hid further spiritual delights. My stupa was accumulating karma at a dangerous rate of speed. At this rate, I was going to reach enlightenment before too long. Oh. Perhaps noticing this state of affairs, she grabbed the blanket and pulled it up to hide her body. The goddess had abandoned me. All light faded from the world. A new dark age was upon us.
Is there a reason you look so dejected?
Oh, it's nothing. I just wanted to take a nice long look at your body in the daylight, teacher.
I don't think it's much to look at. Anyway.
Don't be absurd. Come on, pull back that blanket. Let me bask in your radiance.
Good Lord, you're certainly energetic this morning. Well, whatever. I suppose there isn't any reason to be bashful at this point?
Slowly, Roxy pulled the blanket aside. Just like that, the light came flooding back into my world. Yeah, I saw the light, and it was good. I saw the darkness too. I named it Eros and the light Apollo. Beside the darkness, I saw a belly button and thighs. I named them Cupid and Amor. That seemed like enough work for the first day.
All right, I think that's enough.
Once again, that accursed blanket hid the glories of creation from my eyes. Another dark age was. Okay, even I was getting sick of this bit.
Rudy?
Yes, dear?
Thank you for last night.
Roxy ducked her head to me in an awkward little bow. Last night had been something of a special one for us. It was something we'd built up to over a couple weeks. We'd agreed that Roxy would officially become my second wife once Sylphie gave birth. That had happened a while ago. But up until yesterday, Roxy and I hadn't actually slept together since our arrival in Sharia. Part of it was that everyone was busy adjusting to Lucy's arrival, but I could tell Roxy was also anxious about our new arrangement. That was understandable, but I wanted to do something about it. And so, I put in some special effort to relieve her. I'd treated Roxy like a princess last night. My jaw was still a bit sore this morning. I'd put it through a real workout. It was all worth it, though. She'd most definitely been satisfied.
To be honest, I didn't even know there were techniques like those.
Well, it's a wide world out there, you know? I'd used every trick I knew. Over the years, I'd developed a routine that always left Sylphie breathless from too much moaning. I wanted to overwhelm Roxy with pleasure too, and I figured my techniques would be the quickest way to accomplish that. It hadn't gone exactly as expected, though. Mostly because Roxy kept asking me questions at every step of the process, usually something like, "What should I be doing now?" It seemed she was just the studious type, even in bed. I'd indulged her with brief explanations and tips, followed by extensive hands-on demonstrations.
Teach me more of the details next time, all right?
You could always just lie back and let me do my thing, Roxy. I'll make sure you enjoy yourself.
No, thank you. I want to develop my own skills.
To be honest, this wasn't what I'd pictured when I was planning things out beforehand, but it wasn't half bad, in its own way. Sylphie had her approach to sex, and Roxy had a different one. I found both of them very satisfying, so I wasn't about to complain.
Ugh, I'm going to be late for work.
Her face still slightly flushed, Roxy turned her face away from me and clambered down out of the bed. I stayed right where I was, seated formally on the bed, and bathed in the radiance of her butt as she walked across the room.
What is it?
Oh, nothing. Nothing at all. Sensing my gaze, Roxy looked back at me. I turned and pretended like I'd been getting dressed all along. I felt Roxy's eyes on me from behind. I was starting to consider flexing for her amusement when she walked over and touched my back.
I'm sorry, Rudy. It looks like I scratched you. Does it hurt?
When I craned my head around to get a look, I could just see 4 long, thin welts on one side of my back. They stung a little when I touched them. Roxy had left them on me last night. They were a badge of honor, in other words. Gah! Now she's got me remembering the look on her face when she did that. Down, boy! Down! We don't have time for your antics right now! I'm fine, Roxy.
I hope they don't leave a scar or anything.
Roxy's face was bright red as she mumbled out those words. The fact that she didn't even think of healing them with magic made me feel like she was busy remembering last night as well. I looked up and met her gaze. I could see my face's reflection in her big blue eyes. After a moment, she closed them, clearly anticipating a kiss. I couldn't take her up on that, though. We'd find ourselves right back in bed 10 seconds later, and so I restrained myself to stroking her cheek affectionately. I think it's about time we got dressed, Professor.
Oh. Right. Oh, of course.
Roxy hopped back away from me, looking more than a little embarrassed, and started pulling on her underwear. I turned around and started getting dressed as well.
Do I look all right, Rudy?
Once she'd gotten her robes on, Roxy turned around in front of me so I could look things over for her. Yep, you look perfect.
Really?
Of course, Roxy. You look great. That was an understatement, in fact. If there was anyone stupid enough to imply that Roxy looked anything less than perfect, I'd ensure they saw the error of their ways.
Well, all right. It's my first day on the job, you know? I can't mess this one up.
Roxy squeezed her hand into a fist and nodded to herself. As of today, she was going to be commuting to the University of Magic as well, but as a member of the faculty, this would also be my first day as a third-year student there. But before we get into all that, I should probably turn back the clock a little. Let's talk about the day that Roxy got her new job. Several months earlier, a week had passed since I returned home from my journey. It had been hectic for a while there, but things were finally starting to calm down again. I was relaxing on the sofa in the living room when Roxy walked in.
Rudy, I think I'd like to work at the University of Magic. Would that be all right with you?
Huh? I wasn't sure what she meant at first. She looked down at me with her usual steady expression, fixing her eyes on mine.
I feel like I've got a bit too much time on my hands, so I wanted to see about making myself more useful.
So you're saying you want to become a professor or something?
That's the idea, yes.
It did make sense. She'd seemed a little bit restless since our arrival here. Roxy wasn't exactly the domestic housekeeper type. She'd spent most of her life as a solo adventurer on the road, so she could handle almost any job when she needed to. But when it came to housework, she wasn't nearly as efficient as Aisha, Sylphie, or Lilia. Also, we had 2 dedicated maids living in the house already, so there wasn't much for her to do. She was taking the place of my left hand sometimes, though. I wasn't used to being one-handed yet, and it did make some things really inconvenient. It was a help having Roxy around to assist me with getting dressed and eating my meals. Still, it wasn't like I absolutely needed her around all day. I could bumble by on my own when I had to. In any case, Roxy wanted to be a professor, did she? She was an amazing teacher, of course. I knew personally what a blessing it could be to learn magic from her. Given her talents and wisdom, it would be criminal of me to keep her around as nothing more than a replacement for my missing hand. Keeping her all to myself did have a certain appeal, but for the sake of everyone else in the world, she should be out there enriching our society with her presence.
I'm sure it sounds a little arrogant to you since I'm nothing special as a mage, but I've always enjoyed teaching people what I know.
What? That's not what I was thinking at all. I was actually kind of offended in a way. No matter how many parallel universes might exist, you'd never find one where I thought Roxy was arrogant. I was fated to respect her deeply in every possible world line. It was the choice of Steins Gate. You should go for it, Roxy. Absolutely. You'll be a great professor.
Oh. Well, that's nice to hear. And a little embarrassing, I guess.
Now that the matter was settled, there was no point dilly-dallying around. Okay then. Why don't we go talk to Vice Principal Janius right now?
Genius? Wait, Professor Genius is the vice principal now?
That's right. Do you know him? For some reason, Roxy hesitated for a moment with something like a grimace on her face.
He was my master, actually.
Oh? Is Janius a Saint-Tier water mage then? I thought fire magic was his specialty. Maybe I'm misremembering? Then again, it wasn't that unusual for a mage to study more than one element in depth. Presumably, Janius was a water mage as well, and had just neglected to mention it to me.
I'm afraid I said some very harsh things the last time I saw him. I regret that now, but I was young and hot-headed.
Don't worry about it, Roxy. The past is the past. From what she'd told me, Roxy's master in magic was a pompous, prideful fool of a man. But the Genius I knew was a diligent and polite guy who spent most of his time pushing paper around. He'd probably changed a lot himself over the years.
What if he holds it against me, though?
I'll make sure he puts it all behind him, whether he wants to or not. I already owed Genius a good deal for his help over the years, but for Roxy's sake, I wouldn't hesitate to add to the debt I owed him.
Well, okay then. Hopefully it won't come to that.
With that settled, the 2 of us headed out for the University of Magic. We found Genius buried under a mountain of paperwork, as always.
Well, my goodness.
At the sight of Roxy, he offered us a smile that looked more like a grimace. Awkward smiles were basically his default expression, but this one was definitely more awkward than usual. Sorry to interrupt. Vice Principal Genius, could we have a bit of your time?
Of course, Rudeus. Why don't we step into the other room?
Still, despite the fact that he was obviously busy, Genius readily agreed to speak with us. The man always had a lot on his plate, but he'd never shooed me away when I needed help. He wasn't a bad guy at heart.
Take a seat, please.
After heading over into the reception room, Roxy and I settled down on a sofa across from Genius. When was the last time I'd been in here? After my duel with Badigadi, maybe? It had definitely been a while.
First of all, it's nice to see you again, Roxy.
It's been too long, Master Genius.
Didn't you say wasn't worthy of that title?
Roxy let her gaze fall to the ground.
I'm sorry about all that. I was young and arrogant, I suppose.
The conversation had begun tentatively. They clearly both thought one wrong word might lead to an explosion of anger.
I think that goes for both of us. I was far too proud myself.
Once they apologized to each other, though, they both visibly relaxed. They thought of each other as obstacles for a long time, but at some point they'd probably developed a kind of mutual respect. And only now, years after the fact, were they able to admit that to themselves. I had no way of knowing what they'd argued about in the past, but after all this time it seemed like it was water under the bridge. A decade or two is enough to change most people. After a few seconds, Genius raised his head and cleared his throat.
In any case, what can I do for you two today?
Well, Master Genius, in my travels after leaving the university, I eventually came to understand the joys and rewards of teaching. I was hoping to become an instructor here, if possible.
Well. Didn't you regard teachers as utterly useless at one point? You certainly have changed, Roxy.
Was he going to give us trouble about this? Feeling a little nervous, I shot a look over at Roxy, only to find she was smiling slightly as well. Maybe they'd both found something humorous about the situation. I found myself feeling a little bit left out. If Genius had rejected the idea, I'd been planning to get pretty pushy on Roxy's behalf, but it didn't look like that was going to be necessary. In fact, my presence here was probably unhelpful. Teacher, would it be all right if I left you two to work out the details?
Huh? Okay. I don't mind if you stay around, though.
Well, I was thinking I'd drop in on a friend of mine. Roxy and Genius were old acquaintances. They probably had a lot of catching up to do, and somehow I felt like Roxy might be reluctant to let me hear too many embarrassing stories from her younger days. That made me just a little sad, but it seemed best for me to leave the room. I headed straight over to Zenoba's laboratory. I told him I might be gone for 2 years, and I'd made it back in a mere 6 months. He'd probably be surprised to see me. The outcome of my trip hadn't been especially positive, of course, but there was no need for me to get him depressed as well. I'd have to try and act as cheerfully as possible. Okay? I knocked on the door, then stepped inside without waiting for a reply. Breaking news, Zenoba. I'm back. What? Inside, I found my friend straddling a life-sized mannequin with an ecstatic expression on his face. The two of us stared at each other in silence for a few seconds. What was Zenoba feeling right now, in this instant? What emotions were swirling through his mind? I knew, of course. I knew all too well. Averting my eyes, I closed the door without a word. I waited about 10 minutes until the sounds finally stopped and a small voice called, "I'm ready." I threw open the door vigorously for the second time. Breaking news! Zenoba, I'm back.
Oh, how splendid! If it isn't my beloved master, Rudeus.
The two of us rejoiced in our reunion and embraced each other as if nothing at all had happened. There was no reason for either of us to feel awkward. The two of us were best friends. I didn't see anything. Nothing even happened.
You certainly have returned to us quickly, master. I thought you were going to be gone for 2 years.
Well, it's a long story, but we ended up coming back early.
Ah, so you accomplished a 2-year quest in less than half the time. You never cease to amaze me.
I took a look around the room. It was full of dolls and statues, many of which seemed to be folk art of some kind. I'd been in this room many times before, of course, but it felt almost nostalgic to be back. He'd certainly accumulated a lot of new toys while I was gone, though. In particular, Julie's desk was virtually covered in clay dolls and figurines. She'd obviously been working hard in my absence. Where are Ginger and Julie?
The two of them are out shopping at present. Some of the things I asked them for won't be available until evening, so they won't be back for some time.
I see. So that's why he'd felt it safe to engage in a date with his beloved doll friend. This was probably an uncommon opportunity for him. I almost felt bad about having interrupted.
Oh, master, your hand.
At this point, Zenoba finally noticed that I'd come back without a left hand. He was staring at the stump of my wrist with a troubled look on his face. Yeah, it's gone. I got a little careless out there.
What opponent could be fearsome enough to harm you so grievously?
It was a Hydra with an immunity to magic.
I see. That's no small threat.
When I looked back on that battle, it was obvious we were lacking in the physical attack department. If Zenoba had been along with us, maybe we could have taken the Hydra down more easily. Maybe we really should have turned back temporarily and recruited him, or someone else to help us out. There wasn't much point speculating about it now, though.
If the beast was resistant to magic, I can see why even you would have struggled to defeat it.
Yeah. Oh, and even when we managed to cut off one of its heads, they grew right back. It was no picnic, that's for sure.
It was capable of regeneration as well. How did you manage to slay it, then?
Our swordsman chopped off its heads, and then I seared the stumps with fire.
Ah, now I see. The flesh itself was vulnerable, even if its hide was not! I presume you thought up this strategy yourself, Master?
I just remembered hearing someone say that was the way to do it. Thinking about that battle wasn't doing wonders for my mood. I'd gone in knowing the way to kill that monster, but Paul still ended up dead. The more Zenoba complimented our victory, the more depressed it made me feel.
I must say, Master, you look rather gloomy.
Well, we did win, but it came at a heavy price.
Ah, I see. On that note, I think I have an...
With a smile, he trotted over to his own work desk and started rooting around through the bottom drawer. After a few moments, he pulled out a scale model of a hand. Maybe that wasn't the right way to describe it. It was a bit clunky looking for a hand. Maybe it was a prototype of some kind of glove.
Take a look at this, please.
What is that thing, Zenoba?
Uh-huh. It is the fruit of some 6 months' labors.
Oh?
Indeed. I wasn't just sitting around in your absence, Master.
True enough. You've also been making love to inanimate objects. Whoops. No, I didn't see that. I didn't see anything. Okay then. So what is it exactly?
Observe!
His face full of confidence, Zenoba balled his free hand into a fist, then plunged it inside the model glove. At this point, he shouted something that sounded like an incantation.
Earth, be thou my hand.
All of a sudden, the model began to move. It had been fixed in the shape of a fist, but now its clay-like fingers slowly extended. It clenched again, then unclenched, and then folded down its fingers one by one. All of these movements were startlingly smooth and natural-looking.
It's a magical implement in the shape of a hand. It moves exactly as its bearer wills. I followed your advice, Master, and continued my study of that mysterious doll with Cliff's assistance. This is my first practical implementation of my findings. Master? Master?
Yeah. Sorry about that. I'd actually been speechless with surprise for a moment there. I did remember telling Zenoba to focus on studying the hands and arms of that doll, but I certainly hadn't expected him to make something this impressive in a matter of months. That's incredible, Zenoba. I'm honestly impressed.
He. Oh, but I haven't even gotten to the best part yet. By using this device, I'm able to control my fearsome strength.
Wait, really?
Indeed.
Zenoba nodded with a smile of genuine joy on his face. His happiness was obvious and infectious. If Zenoba could control his strength, that meant he could make figurines himself. He'd finally found a way that he could create the things he loved most. It was hard for me to even imagine how much that meant to him.
My hand returned to Earth.
With Zenoba's second incantation, the hand stopped moving. Apparently, you could turn it on and off at will.
Now then.
Pulling his hand out of the magical implement, Zenoba offered it to me.
Please do give it a try yourself, Master. Simply command it with the words, Earth, be thou my hand, and it will become a part of you. When you wish to remove it, speak the words, "My hand, return to Earth."
All right. Accepting the hand from Zenoba, I pushed it against my left wrist. The thing was made to have room for a balled-up hand inside it, of course. Since I was missing a hand, it felt like it might fall off at any moment. I'm not sure if this thing's gonna stay on, though.
It won't be a problem. Go ahead. Try the incantation.
Okay, then. Earth, be thou my hand. The instant I spoke those words, I felt the device draining mana from my arm. It didn't take that much, but of course it wouldn't, if Zenoba could use it. Whoa! Whoa! As soon as it absorbed my mana, I felt the device press itself tightly against my stump. The sense that I was wearing something quickly faded away. In its place, I could feel the artificial hand that was now connected to me.
What do you think?
Gingerly, I tried moving my left hand. I opened and closed it, stretched out each finger starting from the thumb and folded them down, starting from the pinky. The crude-looking clay responded as if it was just another part of my body. It's moving! It's really moving!
Ah, but there's more to it than that. Try touching something. Why don't you?
Right? I reached out to take a small wood sculpture from the nearby table. It was a carving of a horse, about the size of my fist. My artificial fingertips could feel its weight and texture. The sensation was a little dull and indistinct almost, as if I were wearing a thick pair of cotton gloves, but it was definitely there. You can even feel things through this? That's incredible.
But of course, one could hardly hope to make a figurine without a sense of touch.
True enough. You needed to be pretty precise with the amount of force you used when you were carving something. Since Zenoba made this with his own goals in mind, this sense of touch would have been an essential feature. Just to see what might happen, I tried casting a small spell through my new fingers. A tiny ball of water appeared in front of them. It seemed like magic wasn't going to be a problem either. Had Zenoba really created this thing in only half a year? That couldn't have been easy. His passion for figurines must have kept him incredibly motivated.
I wasn't entirely sure if you'd be able to use it without a hand, but it seems there aren't any major problems.
Yeah, it moves just fine. I can feel the fingers too, and use magic.
If you wish to increase its strength, simply feed it more of your mana. Its power will increase accordingly.
Oh, really?
Of course, if you were to give it all of your mana, I would expect it to fall apart under the strain. It's sturdier than a normal human hand, but do be cautious.
Well, let's see. As we spoke, I fed the device a bit more mana. The weight of the sculpture in my hand seemed to disappear entirely. Wow, this is really... Oh!
Ah! Ah!
I'd snapped one of the legs clean off the little horse without even meaning to.
Master, how could you?
Sorry, Zenoba. I'll make it up to you.
That was a traditional sculpture from the ancient principality of Giara. I doubt I'll ever find its like again.
Well, maybe I can make you something new. It'd just be an earth magic sculpture, but... At this offer, Zenoba's face lit up.
Ooh, how splendid! I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pressure you.
Taking the sculpture from me, he carefully put it away inside his desk. Maybe he was planning to superglue it back together or something. Hopefully it would go well. Zenoba turned back to face me.
That hand is yours to keep, Master Rudeus. It's still only a prototype, of course, but I'm sure it's better than nothing.
Really? Are you sure?
With you and Cliff to help me, I'm sure I can make another of comparable quality in no time at all.
That made sense. He was still actively working on his research after all. It would be nice to make the thing more sensitive. That way, I could use it for recreational fondling. There were countless other possible improvements, of course. This thing had a lot of potential. For example, we could find a way to make it transform into various tools or weapons. How useful would it be to have fingers that turned into drills whenever you needed one? Or a hand that turned into a magic cannon on demand? Zenoba, I think this might be a pretty amazing invention.
I quite agree. Not to toot my proverbial horn, but I do think it's a rather splendid little item.
As useful as it might be in combat or in making figurines, there were plenty of other applications. For one thing, it was a brilliant prosthetic. In this world, it was possible to reattach a severed limb if you made your way to a magician with advanced skills in healing. And wounds that would have landed you in a hospital back in my old world could be cured quickly with even elementary spells. On the other hand, having a missing part of your body regenerated was extremely expensive. Unless you were very wealthy, it probably wasn't going to happen. And there weren't many magicians even capable of restoring an entire arm or leg. You could find some in the holy country of Milis, but even there they were very rare. A mere adventurer couldn't expect to employ their services. When a common villager or adventurer lost a part of their body, for the most part they had to make do with crude replacement, something more like Captain Ahab's wooden peg leg. If we started selling magical prosthetics like this at a relatively affordable price, we'd be helping a lot of people, and making plenty of money in the process. The healers of Milis might not be too pleased about that, but fortunately, they were on the other side of the world from us. As long as we got the backing of a larger organization like the University or the Magic Guild, it would probably work out just fine. Do you have a name for this thing, Zenoba?
I hadn't given it one as of yet, no. Neither Cliff nor I have much talent for naming things, I'm afraid.
Oh yeah? That wasn't much fun. Surely we could come up with something, right?
Would you care to do the honors for us, Master Rudeus?
Huh? Sure, I guess. I didn't think of myself as especially great at naming things either, but I couldn't turn him down if he wanted my help. Looking down at the thing that was now serving as my left hand, I took a moment to think. When it came to removable, artificial hands, the first words that popped into my head were rocket punch. But it wasn't like I could fire this thing off at my enemies or anything, although I could always throw it at them in a pinch. The second term that came to mind was hand of glory, as in the severed, pickled hand of an executed criminal, which supposedly held magical powers, not the special move of a perverted, bandana-wearing anime character. I didn't feel the need to reuse a name that already existed, though. This thing was a brand new invention, something this world had never seen before. Maybe the inventors deserve to get some credit. Why don't we take a bit from Zanoba and a bit from Cliff and call it a Zalif prosthesis?
Shouldn't there be part of your name in there as well, Master?
Nah, that's all right. I didn't really contribute to this or anything.
I don't believe that's entirely true, but very well. From now on, we'll call that device the Zalif prosthesis, Prototype 1.
In any case, it seemed I now had a magical replacement for my missing hand. It wasn't as precise or as sensitive as my old one, but it moved just fine, and I could at least feel things through it. It could also become very powerful with the addition of a little excess mana. I was going to need some practice to get the hang of using the correct amount of force, though. My goal was to get to the point where I could gently squeeze Roxy and Sylphie's breasts.
There's still quite a lot of room for improvement, of course, but we also need to continue our study of the automaton. What should we prioritize, Master Rudeus?
Let's see. Apparently, there were some fundamental issues with this prototype. For one thing, its mana consumption wasn't ideal. I could use it indefinitely, but it would suck Zenoba dry after only 2 or 3 hours. The fingers were also a little on the thick side, which wasn't aesthetically pleasing. And of course, its sense of touch wasn't perfect yet. If we managed to resolve all those problems, it would be an even more amazing invention. That said, this prosthetic wasn't the main focus of our research. It was just a byproduct of it. Well, let's not lose our focus here. Our goal was to make an automaton of our own with our own hands. This prosthetic would definitely command a high price, and it made for a very convenient tool. We could probably put it on the market at some point, but I didn't want it taking up all of our research time. We're trying to make a fully automated doll here, right? We can't let ourselves forget that.
Very true.
For the moment, let's put improving the prosthetic on the back burner and get back to studying that automaton.
Of course. I rather expected you might say as much, Master.
Zenoba and I seem to be in agreement, fortunately. We could always work on the prosthetic on the side. The two of us kept talking for a while afterwards. For the most part, Our conversation focused on the various dolls and figurines I'd seen on the Begarit continent. When I told him about their glass sculptures, Zenoba's eyes lit up with excitement. Anyway, how's Julie been doing while I was gone?
Quite well. Just the other day, she finished a figurine of a certain gentleman. I believe she wanted to show it to you, Master Rudeus.
Had she finished the Roed figurine already? I did want to see that as soon as possible, but that's good to hear. But if she's not going to be back until evening, I guess I might not be able to see her today.
Do you have some other business to attend to?
My master's interviewing for a job at the moment. Once she's done, I was planning to go around and say hi to everyone.
Your master?
Calling out Rudy. Are you in there? This is the place, isn't it?
It was Roxy's voice. Apparently she'd finished with the vice principal while Zenoba and I were catching up. Come on in, we were just talking about you, actually.
Pardon me.
Roxy stepped into the room tentatively. She paused to look around the room for a moment, then gingerly made her way over to my side.
This is quite an impressive laboratory. Is it really all right for me to be in here? I feel like there are a few things I shouldn't really be seeing.
Don't be silly, Roxy. There's not a single place on this campus that you're not allowed to enter.
I don't really think that's up to you, Rudy.
Maybe not, but you're welcome here, at least. As the two of us chatted, Zenoba stood frozen in place. After a moment, I noticed that he was trembling slightly. Zenoba, let me introduce you. This is Roxy M. Greyrat, my master in magic.
It's nice to see you again, Prince Zenoba. I'm glad to find you looking so hale and healthy.
Roxy bowed her head deeply to Zenoba.
Oh.
Zenoba, for his part, just stared at her and trembled even more visibly than before. Finally, he raised his shaking arms up above his head. All of a sudden, he bellowed out a strange roar of some kind.
Oh!
After leaping up into the air like a frog, he dropped flat to the ground, prostrating himself with his hands stretched out in front of him.
Whoa!
Roxy flinched in surprise and stepped behind me, partially hiding herself from view.
How wonderful to see you again, Lady Roxy. My deepest apologies for how rudely I treated you in the past. I had no idea at the time that you were the master of my master.
Please stop groveling. You're the prince of an entire kingdom, and I'm just a magician. What if someone were to see this?
Roxy was obviously flustered, not that I could blame her. This was probably my cue to step in and calm things down a little. Not to worry, teacher. If anyone tried to make an issue of it, I'd silence them myself.
Not you too, Rudy. Have you lost your mind?
God, she's so cute when she's all worked up. There wasn't really anything to be worried about, though. I think you just need to take a few deep breaths and calm down, Roxy. It's perfectly natural that Zenoba would want to prostrate himself in front of you.
Is it? Could you explain why?
Well, Zenoba, it's perfectly natural, isn't it? His face still pressed solidly into the ground. Zenoba nodded respectfully.
Indeed, she is the master of my master, after all.
See? Perfectly reasonable all around.
That's not an explanation. I want an actual reason.
You don't need a reason to do what comes naturally, right? Just accept the gesture gracefully. Why don't you?
But...
Oh, very well then. Zenoba, would you mind standing up? It seemed like we weren't making any progress in this conversation, so I decided to let Zenoba get back on his feet. The man was on the tall side, so once he was standing again, he probably had a clear view of the top of Roxy's adorable head. That struck me as decidedly impudent, but I'd have to let it pass. He couldn't control his own height, after all.
In any case, Miss Roxy, how was your interview? Do you think you'll be hired as a professor?
yes. Master Genius, the vice principal. That is, seemed to think my skills as a magician were adequate.
Well, of course they are. You're the woman who taught me magic after all.
You did most of your learning on your own, Rudy. I'm not sure how much that says about my potential as an educator.
Apparently, Roxy would be starting her new job as an instructor here as soon as the next term got underway. This clearly called for a celebration. It wasn't the only thing we had to celebrate either. We'd be getting married soon. My sisters were going to be turning 10 before too long, and we had another member of the family on the way. It might be easiest to consolidate them all into one big party or something. Apart from everything else, Paul's letter had suggested having a celebration once everyone made it back here. There wasn't any rush, though. We all had a lot on our plates right now. It would be better to wait until things were a little less crazy. Oh, I almost forgot. I was planning to go around and say hi to everyone else, too.
Quite reasonable, Master. I'm sure they'll be overjoyed to see you back so soon.
Zenoba smiled so brightly that I couldn't help grinning as well. More than anything else, I was excited to finally introduce Roxy to the others. All right then, Zenoba. Thanks again for the prosthetic. I'll come back soon.
Please do stop by when you have the time, Master. Julie will be glad to see you.
Of course.
One last thing. If your new hand starts giving you any trouble, it might be faster for you to show it to Cliff directly rather than coming to me.
Got it. With that, the two of us left Zenoba's rooms behind. As we walked down the chilly corridors of the university, a creaking sound echoed off the walls. It was coming from my new prosthesis. I was actively experimenting with how much magic I could safely feed it. Every time I opened and closed the hand, it emitted an audible squeak. I suppose it wasn't reasonable to expect a prototype to be designed with silent operation in mind.
Is that prosthesis a magical implement, Rudy?
That's right. It's apparently the product of some serious research and development on Zenoba's part.
It's very impressive work, I have to say. It seems to be capable of very precise movements.
Yeah, it's really something. Given how well it works, I think I'll be able to get by just fine from now on, even without having you around all the time.
All right, I suppose so.
For some reason, Roxy's face took on a slightly downcast expression.
I'm sorry, Rudy. I suppose I wasn't taking your situation into account. I was so eager to become a teacher. I didn't even think about the trouble it might cause you.
What, you mean with my missing hand? It's not that big a deal, really. Having Roxy around had been a big help, but it wasn't like I'd asked her to take on a role as my personal assistant. Obviously, I wanted her to put her own plans first. For one thing, there were plenty of other people in my life who were willing to help me out when necessary. Not that I was actually going to say that, since it would sound like I was calling Roxy replaceable.
In any case, I'm certainly glad you have a left hand again.
Yep, now I can touch you twice as often. I reached out and stroked Roxy's shoulders gently with my artificial hand. I could feel her warmth and the softness of her body even through her robe. Apparently, this thing was sensitive to temperature as well. It really was well made. I kept caressing Roxy for a lengthy period of time, but she accepted it without complaint. Anyway, I want to introduce you to everyone. Mind coming with me for a while?
Oh, of course.
For the rest of the afternoon, I went around the campus introducing Roxy to my friends and acquaintances. We managed to see Linnea, Prasenna, Ariel, Luke, and Nanahoshi. I'd been planning to visit Cliff as well, but I heard passionate moans from inside his laboratory when we approached and decided to come back some other time. The reactions we got were widely varied. Linnea and Prasenna responded in a particularly amusing way. The moment they got a whiff of Roxy's scent, they both twitched to attention with looks of fear on their faces. As they stood there meekly with their tails between their legs, I introduced Roxy as my beloved teacher. They promptly bowed their heads to her. I guess beast folk are quick to recognize people they really shouldn't mess with. Their instincts were right on the money this time. Ariel and Luke, on the other hand, were surprisingly oblivious. When I showed up to say hello, the first words out of Ariel's mouth were, "I see you remembered to stop by after your trip, at least." She didn't seem genuinely upset, but she did explain that she could have offered me assistance if I'd come to see her before leaving. Considering that my inadequate preparations had ended up costing me dearly, hearing that left me a little shamefaced. I ended up apologizing for my oversight. Putting that aside, though, when I got around to introducing Roxy, the two of them stared at her in blank surprise, then turned to look at each other. They were obviously surprised that such a young magician would be taking on a role in the faculty here. Still, Ariel was a princess with all the diplomatic skills that implied. She greeted Roxy very politely without any hint of confusion in her voice. The woman's self-control was impressive. We found Nanahoshi looking somewhat the worse for wear. She might have caught a cold or something since she was coughing like crazy. When she saw my face, she smiled in relief and muttered, "Now we can get the research back on track." When I introduced Roxy and explained that she would be teaching at the university from now on, her response was a disinterested, "I see." This struck me as a little too curt, so I took the time to elaborate on Roxy's many virtues and talents. Sadly, Nanahoshi just grimaced and called me a cradle robber. I suppose it was too much to expect that an ordinary high school girl could grasp Roxy's greatness. By this point, it was getting around to evening, and we'd stopped by everyone I wanted to visit. Just as I was about to suggest we head home, though, Roxy spoke up with a slightly disgruntled expression on her face.
Rudy?
"Yes, Roxy?"
I'm very happy that you're taking the time to introduce me to your friends, but I feel like you're being a bit excessive in your praise of me.
"Really? It wasn't intentional, I assure you."
Are you serious?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, no words I could offer would possibly be sufficient to really capture how wonderful you are. I thought I was selling you a little short, if any. Frowning, Roxy jabbed a finger up at me.
Okay, there you go again. Are you teasing me or something, Rudy?
Don't be ridiculous. My respect and admiration for you is as real as it gets.
Oh, for crying out loud. You know, whenever you start calling me teacher, I can't help feeling like you're just messing with me.
Roxy paused to let out a long sigh. I honestly thought my opinion of her was perfectly justified, but it seemed she found it somewhat overblown.
Putting all that aside, though, you introduced me to quite a few of your friends and told them I was your teacher. But you didn't once mention that I was your wife.
Oh. Just like that, I realized how badly I'd screwed this up. This might not even be something I could fix at this point. Roxy was perfectly right. She wasn't Roxy McGurdia anymore. She was Roxy M. Greyrat now. I'd introduced her that way to everyone, of course, and she'd repeated it when she made her greetings. I guess a part of me had assumed that was enough, that it was perfectly obvious we were married. At the very least, I was confident someone as sharp as Ariel would have figured it out. Still, that was no excuse. Roxy had every right to be furious. I suppose I'd wanted to emphasize her greatness more than anything else. And a part of me still thought she was far too good to be married to the likes of me. But she clearly wanted me to introduce her as my wife. This was an unforgivable blunder on my part. Roxy was my second wife, yes, but that didn't make her any less my wife. We'd be spending the rest of our lives together, maybe even having children. I'm so sorry, Roxy, sweetheart. But you know how much I love you, right? How can I make it up to you? Want me to go introduce myself to your parents?
No. I don't think that's necessary. It's a long trip after all. We'll get to it eventually.
Eventually. Hopefully Rowan and Rokari were doing well over on the Demon Continent. Now that I was married to Roxy, they were my in-laws. I owed them for the assistance they'd given me many years ago, too. I kinda wanted to make the time to go and see them. If we plotted a route through a couple of the teleportation circles, we might be able to make it there in 2 months or so, but... All right then, we'll have to make the time one of these days. There was no need to rush things. Once everything settled down, maybe we could take the entire family out to say hello to them. Pushing the thought to the back of my mind, I headed home with my new wife at my... Legends of the University number 1. The boss can fire his hand like a rocket. Chapter 2, Year 3. The first day of my 3rd year in the university had arrived. When I woke up and came down into the living room, I found Sylphie already there, breastfeeding Lucy.
Good morning, Rudy.
Morning, Sylphie. Lucy was still only a few months old, but she seemed to be strong and healthy so far. Sylphie was doing well, too. The only difference was, I felt like she'd grown more feminine somehow. Maybe it was the way she'd let her hair grow out, or the whole new mother aura, or just the fact that she'd gotten a little older. Whatever the case might be, she was blossoming into a Hollywood-style beauty. She could sit silently on the sofa, doing nothing in particular, and it still felt like she was posing for a portrait. Sometimes I would even hesitate to speak to her. I was so awestruck. Still, when I did get her attention, she was the same Sylphie I knew and loved, eager for attention and affection. That was always reassuring.
Lucy's full of energy again today.
I looked down at our baby, who was currently sucking furiously away at my wife's breast. She was going at it just as vigorously I did in bed. Like father, like daughter. Lucy was a healthy baby, but she was a little bit on the quiet side. She didn't cry much at all. For a while, I was anxious that she might be sick or have some sort of physical problem. Whenever I raised the subject, though, Sylphie just smiled and called me a worrywart. I didn't remember being so jumpy back when my siblings were born, but I guess it's different when the baby is your own child. Despite my concerns, Lucy had been growing steadily and staying healthy. She was still on the quiet side for a baby her age, but her body seemed sturdy enough. Once, when Lilia was looking at my calm little daughter, she observed, "She reminds me of you at that age, Master Rudeus." That gave me a start, obviously. The word reincarnation flashed through my mind. I was a pretty crappy person in my previous life, to be honest. The idea made me worried. What if Lucy was the reincarnation of some good-for-nothing moron from Japan? The idea kept gnawing away at me for a while. Ultimately, I resorted to speaking to my baby daughter in Japanese and English to see if she reacted. Anyone who happened to walk by would have seen me muttering to my newborn child things like, "You've figured it out by now, right? This is a parallel universe. And you are my sunshine. I am a pen." I'm sure it must have been a comical sight. I remember Aisha snickering at me from the shadows. My methods weren't exactly the best, but I came away thinking that my daughter probably wasn't anyone's reincarnation. When I talked to her, all she'd do was smile and babble incoherently. It was possible she was just hiding her true nature, of course, but I don't know how many grown-ups could keep up a perfect imitation of a baby for this long. And even if that was the case, it was kind of cute in its own way to imagine somebody desperately pretending to be an infant. Yeah, one way or another, Lucy was definitely cute. I could sit next to her cradle all day without ever getting bored of watching her. All in all, I didn't really care if she was somebody's reincarnation. I was going to take good care of her either way. Paul had done the same for me, after all. Our daughter's as adorable as ever, I see.
No kidding. Why is she so cute anyway?
Probably takes after her mom. Slipping my arms over Sylphie's shoulders from behind, I hugged her gently to me. I lowered my head as if to deliver a kiss to the back of her head, but then kept going and buried my face in her hair. She smelled faintly of milk. It was sort of like a natural perfume.
Hee hee. Thanks, Rudy.
Rubbing her face against my hand, Sylphie smiled shyly, and then she spotted Roxy standing behind me.
Hello there, Roxy. How was Rudy last night?
Roxy twitched in surprise.
Oh, well, he was very attentive.
Really? I know he can get pretty rough at times. He didn't scare you or anything?
No, not really. It was the second time, after all. And he was gentle with, sorry. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this.
You don't have anything to apologize for.
I don't.
Nope.
The two of them were still a little awkward with each other, but at least there wasn't any hostility between them. You could tell they were trying to be respectful and considerate. That told me they wanted to make this work. A three-way relationship like this wasn't as simple as a monogamous one. It was probably going to take some effort on all of our parts. In particular, we would be leaning on Sylphie a lot. Her open-mindedness was the only thing that had even made this arrangement possible. I'd gone back on my word to her and taken on Roxy as a second wife. She would have been justified in slapping me in the face with my divorce papers.
Breakfast? Breakfast? Time to get some breakfast?
At this point, Aisha strode into the living room singing to herself. It was a crappy song, to be honest. Maybe she'd made it up on the spot. I guess even geniuses have their weak points.
Good morning, Rudeus. Good morning, Miss Sophie and Miss Roxy. Today's breakfast is pretty much the same as always.
She was carrying white bread, green soup, and warm horse milk. In this regional, it was traditional for new mothers to drink plenty of that. Supposedly, it helped them breastfeed.
That won't do, Aisha. Tell everyone what you're serving.
Lilia had entered the room behind her daughter. Apparently, she'd been in the kitchen as well.
We have a potato and yoko bean soup, served with white bread and highly nutritious horse milk.
Of course, we knew this already, since it was what we ate more or less every morning, but I guess there's some value in keeping up the little formalities.
Very good. Please wait just a moment, everyone.
With that, she headed up to the second floor. A few moments later, she returned with Zenith in tow. My mother stepped into the living room, paused to stare at me, and then silently headed over to her usual seat at the table. "Good morning, Mom." Months had passed at this point, but Zenith's memories hadn't returned to her. However, she was changing in some small but noticeable ways. In particular, she acted very differently when Norn was around. She'd stroke her daughter's head or try to feed her from her own plate, that sort of thing. Almost like she thought the girl was only 2 or 3 years old. Norn seemed unsettled by this at times, but she accepted Zenith's attentions. I don't know exactly what the girl was thinking. I had to assume she had very mixed feelings about it, though. She was still at the age where it was natural for a girl to be attached to her mother or getting ready to rebel against her. Either way, it's a period of your life where your relationship with your parents feels very important. Still, Norn understood Zenith's condition, and she was clearly trying to put her mother's feelings before her own. I never would have expected that kind of maturity from her a few years ago, but I guess people do change. It was hard to know what any of it really meant on Zenith's end, though. Did she just feel a connection to her daughter on some instinctive level, or was she slowly starting to regain pieces of her memory? For the moment, it seemed best to just wait and see what happened. Okay, everyone, let's eat. We all ate our breakfast together. Sylphie was seated on my right and Roxy on my left. On the other side of the table were Aisha, Lilia, and Zenith, in that order. Norn would have been sitting next to her mother, but she wasn't here today. I didn't remember anyone actively working it out, but we'd somehow arrived at this seating arrangement anyway.
I'm sure you remember, but I'll be back at the university starting today. Take good care of Lucy for me, okay?
Of course, Miss Sylphiette. Leave everything to us.
Sylphie and I would be returning to our classes as students starting today. Lilia and Aisha would be taking care of our child while we were away from the house. Lucy was still an infant, though. She couldn't survive without access to her mommy's breasts. Wait, did that make me an infant, too? Putting that aside for the moment, we decided to hire a wet nurse. It was a lady named Suzanne who lived in the neighborhood, a former adventurer and a mother of 2. She was an old acquaintance of mine, but no need to get into that right now. Thanks for the food. It was time for me to get my 3rd year at the university started. Yo! Mornin', sir. Good to see you back at it. The moment we set foot inside the campus, students I didn't recognize started coming up to say their hellos to me. They were rough-looking types, but they were all oddly respectful. Maybe I was projecting an aura of authority these days. I guess I was a father and the head of a household now, come to think of it. Not that I felt any different.
Hey, boss!
As I was reflecting on all this, the most dangerous-looking students of all appeared before us.
Good morning, boss! Oh, morning to you two, Fitz and Miss Roxy.
It was Linnea and Persina, of course. These two were in their final year as students now, but they hadn't changed much at all. Linnea was still strutting around arrogantly, and Persina was gnawing on something that looked like ham even as she spoke to us.
Aren't you a lucky guy, boss? Strutting into school with a girl on either side. Where'd he get off dumping us and then picking up a second wife anyway? Fucking unfair is what it is. We're graduating this year, you know. Guess we gotta grab ourselves someone too. Yeah, it all comes down to this. Gotta get us a man before we head home.
They seemed genuinely worked up. It felt they were envious of me, not my wives, mind you, but me. Deep down, the two of them clearly wanted to be leading a pack of their own. It was that Decepticon mindset at work again.
Good luck, you two.
It was the teasing response of a woman who had some confidence in her own position. I was a little surprised, honestly. Then again, Sylphie had known these two for longer than me. I guess it made sense that she'd be comfortable dealing with them. Roxy, on the other hand, seemed to have taken their words at face value. She dipped her head to them with an apologetic expression.
I'm sorry about this. I suppose I cut my place in line, didn't I?
Maya? Huh?
Linnea and Persena were naturally taken aback by this.
Nah. That's okay. We didn't really mean it that way, you know? Yeah, we're just mad at our lack of fucking sex appeal. We're not dissing you, Miss Roxy.
All of a sudden, the two of them were apologizing frantically to Roxy. She was more than worthy of such deference, of course, but it was still almost creepy how desperate they were. I'd sort of been expecting these two to say something like, "We're way sexier than that little shrimp, Mew," or "You fucking married a demon." To be honest, not that I would have tolerated such disrespect. After their apologies were over, the two of them sympathetically patted Sylphie on the shoulders.
This must be tough for you too, right? Hang in there, Fitz. Won't be easy keeping up with her, but I know you can do it.
Sylphie blinked, looking a little nonplussed.
Huh? Better get your second going, ASAP. Yeah, gotta maintain that lead. What?
Sylphie paused for a moment to think, then murmured, "Oh," her face taking on a slightly awkward expression.
Rudy's still showing me plenty of love, you know?
Linnea and Persena reacted to this by sniffling loudly in exaggerated sympathy.
The poor sweet kid. I'm tearing up here. Come on, Fitz. A quiet type like you is obviously gonna fade into the background once Boss picks up number 3 and 4, right? This is so sad.
Wow, listen to these jerks go. I wasn't planning on adding any more wives to my family as it happened. And even if I did, I wasn't going to start neglecting Sylphie for any reason. She'd put her body on the line to help me out. I was never ever going to forget that. Not that I'd repaid her too well so far, what with the Roxy thing and all.
That's not true. Right, Rudy?
I couldn't make out Sylphie's expression underneath her sunglasses, but her voice sounded anxious. I needed to step up and give her some reassurance. Of course it isn't. I leaned over and pulled her into a big hug. Rubbing her back affectionately, I took a deep breath and prepared to express my feelings. It was probably best to make things clear here and now, with lots of witnesses around. "I love you, Sylphie." This forceful declaration earned a round of applause from a number of random bystanders. Sylphie blushed furiously and wriggled around inside my arms.
Rudy, come on. This isn't the place or the time.
"Oh, really? You're the one who asked me for reassurance."
Well, if you want to make a big gesture, you ought to do the same for Roxy, too.
Fair enough. I glanced over at Roxy.
That's not really necessary. I'm all right.
She was looking up at me with something like expectation in her eyes. Without any further hesitation, I embraced Roxy with my left arm, keeping Sylphie pressed against me with my right. Ah, what bliss. I had a wife on both sides now. "I love both of you." This time, I got a chorus of boos from some of the on-looking students. They were probably members of the Millis Church or something. "Whatever. Your laws don't apply to me. I am the law." In any case, all the public attention was getting to be a bit much for Sylphie. Her face was as red as a tomato.
Oh, good grief. I'm going to meet up with Princess Ariel now, all right?
"Sure. See you at lunchtime, Sylphie."
It's Fitz when we're at the university, remember?
Oh, right. That whole bit had slipped my mind entirely. I hadn't attended classes here in nearly a year, so I guess I'd just forgotten. To be honest, though, it didn't feel like there was that much of a point in her continuing the charade. She was just too pretty these days to be convincing as a boy. Well, whatever. She was cute either way, and it was her call how she wanted to present herself.
I suppose I'll be heading to the faculty offices myself, then.
right? Good luck on your first day, Roxy.
Oh, that reminds me. You should really call me Professor Roxy while we're on school grounds.
True, we had to keep our personal and professional lives separate. Fine with me, of course. But, more importantly, Roxy really was a professor today, wasn't she? That was kind of spicy. I found myself thinking back to last night. I wonder how late they let you borrow the keys for the PE storage shed. At this point, I abruptly remembered something that felt important. Professor Roxy?
Yes, Rudeus?
This is the first day of the new term, right? Doesn't the faculty have an early meeting or anything? All the color had drained from her face. That probably wasn't a good sign.
Sorry, but I need to go. Now. Excuse me.
Within seconds, she'd rushed off toward the faculty offices and disappeared into the crowd. I guess we hadn't thought through our timing. A faculty member wasn't going to be operating on the same schedule as a mere student, of course. Well, okay then. Let's get going too, guys.
Meow! We're with you, boss.
For my part, I headed off to the special classroom with my loyal underlings in tow. We had a mandatory homeroom today. Both my wives had disappeared for the day, but somehow I still had two cute girls at my sides. Maybe my popular days had come at last. Not that I was going to lay a hand on Linnea or Persina or anything. It's tough being a man sometimes.
Oh, yeah. That reminds me, there's a rumor going around about you, boss.
Linnea turned to face me, her ears pricking straight up. I could see the curiosity sparkling in her eyes. Really?
Yep. They're saying you fought a really epic battle. So epic you lost your left hand?
Come to think of it, all I'd told these two was that I'd made it back from my journey, and that Roxy would be teaching at the university. Zenoba was the only friend I'd gone into any of the details with at this point. Had he spread the word around then? Or maybe it was Cliff. He'd probably heard the whole story from Elenialis after all.
That's our boss for you, Mew. Flies off to the demon continent to fight one of the 7 great powers and sacrifices his own hand to win.
What? What? Where did the 7 great powers thing come from?
Your opponent had to scuttle away in shame. Am I right? Way to go.
Wait, slow down for a second, Linnea. This was just bizarre. How the hell had the rumor gotten this twisted around? I really didn't appreciate it. What if it circulated enough that everyone started actually believing I'd beaten down one of the 7 great powers? What if one of the powers heard that rumor? What if it was number 2 on that list? A guy by the name of Orsted.
Well, that was the story I just came up with now anyway. Don't worry, I'll make sure Taste spread it all around my...
Before Linnea could finish her sentence, I'd grabbed her by the tail and given it a ferocious yank. She lashed out at me with her claws extended, but I evaded her swipes using my demon eye. After a few failed attempts, she pressed her hands against her butt and glared up at me with tears in her eyes.
What was that for? Don't yank on a lady's tail.
I glared right back at her. Don't spread any exaggerated rumors around. You got that? I'll pull that thing right off you.
Huh? Chicotted! I'm sorry.
These two had a history of rumor-mongering. They'd spread word of my problems in bed all around campus, which I could forgive them for since it was true at the time after all. But this was a different case entirely. It could cause me real problems. I might even end up dead. That was the kind of rumor you needed to nip in the bud.
We heard about what happened from Zenoba. You fought a Hydra that was immune to magic, right? He was saying he should have been there. Thought he could have kept you from getting hurt. That's right. Mew. But we were just impressed you managed to even beat that thing. So, I was figuring we could make sure everyone knows how badass you are.
Thanks, but no thanks. I'd definitely gotten a bit stronger over the years, but when it really mattered, I still came up painfully short. I didn't want people getting an inflated opinion of me. I didn't deserve it.
But you know, boss, even if we don't say nothing, people are already making stuff up. Everyone can see you got an artificial hand now. She's right, Mew. It won't make much of a difference if we throw our story out there, too.
I was apparently a semi-notorious figure around campus, so it was probably inevitable that people would speculate. Still, I wanted to keep the 7 great powers out of this. That was dangerous territory. I still had a very vivid memory of the day Orsted nearly killed me. What other rumors have you heard going around?
There's a whole bunch. Let me see.
Linnea proceeded to rattle off a range of stories. Some people were saying I'd battled a super warrior to the death. Others that I'd faced down a horde of 100 monsters alone. Still others claimed that I'd successfully cast a forbidden ancient spell, but lost my hand in the process. None of them sounded particularly credible, so I had to assume they'd disappear before too long. Come to think of it, the 7 great powers were probably used to having people invent nonsensical stories about them too. They were incredibly famous for their prowess in battle. Maybe they wouldn't pay any mind to some silly story bouncing around a university, even if they somehow caught wind of it. Well, sorry about the tale.
You human folk can't begin to understand how much that friggin' hurts, Mew. It's unforgivable to yank a lady's tail.
Fine. I'll buy you some fish one of these days, okay?
He, sweet. I should try complaining more often. Make mine meat instead.
The 3 of us headed off down the hallway once again. Our homeroom was the same as ever. The other 5 sat in a loose group centered around my desk. Zenoba was playing with his figurines, his loyal assistant Julie at his side. Linnea was busy filing her claws. Persenna was chomping on some meat, and Cliff was earnestly studying some thick book. There was also Ginger, who was standing quietly in the back of the room, although she wasn't really a student. It had been a long time since I was in this classroom, but everything felt immediately familiar. It was hard to imagine we'd be losing 2 of our number in just a year, assuming Linnea and Persina managed to graduate, of course.
By the way, Rudeus, is there a reason you didn't stop by to say hello to me, along with all the others?
I could understand the grumpiness. I hadn't gotten around to going to see him. Sorry about that, Cliff. I did stop by your place right after I got back, but it sounded like you and Elena were otherwise occupied.
I see. I suppose I was with her that evening, yes. All right, never mind then. My apologies.
Cliff backed down quickly enough, fortunately. But even so, I was starting to get the sense that people in this spectrum of society were really particular about these sorts of formalities. Ariel had been disgruntled about the way I left without a word, too. Back when I was an adventurer, everyone was a lot more casual about this stuff.
However, your first child's been born, yes? You could have gotten in touch about that, at least. I'm still in training, but I could have offered her the blessing, at least.
Yeah, I guess.
Right. You don't belong to the Millis Church, so I suppose that's not necessary. Still, it almost feels like you've been avoiding me. I'm sure you're busy with your child, but couldn't you have found the time to drop by my laboratory at least once?
He had a point. Maybe I had been avoiding him. There was a reason for that, though. A reason named Roxy. I had 2 wives now, and Cliff was a devout member of the Millis Church. He probably wasn't going to react too favorably to the news.
Is there some reason you didn't want to see me, maybe? If so, I'd like to hear it from you personally, if you don't mind.
He was being weirdly tenacious about this today. I got the feeling Elenilis had already filled him in. Knowing her, she'd probably worked him over a little too. I could see her saying something like, "I know you're passionate about your faith, Cliff, but if you forgive him for his trespasses, you'll show everyone just how tolerant and kind you are." Of course, I didn't need Cliff's forgiveness or permission to marry Roxy. But that didn't mean I wanted to ruin our friendship either. I was probably better off playing along here. I could confess the truth, let Cliff forgive me, and then compliment his open-mindedness at length. He'd get his ego stroked, and we'd put the matter behind us. It was a win-win, really. Okay then, I guess I'll dance on your strings, Owen Eyes. Actually, Cliff Airy asked Brokens. Pardon me. Before I could finish my sentence, though, someone had opened the door to our classroom. 2 people stepped inside. One of them was the professor in charge of our class, who usually ran our homerooms. The other was an adorable young lady in a robe, with sleepy eyes and a serious expression, who looked slightly nervous. The sort of girl who obviously did her very best at all times, and you couldn't help wanting to hug. by which I mean it was Roxy. Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce you to the assistant professor who will be helping me with the special class.
Nice to meet you. I'm Roxy M. Greyrat.
Zenoba and the others just stared in surprise, but our professor forged right ahead. Professor Roxy may look quite young, but that's simply a trait of her particular people. She's actually over 50 years old. It seems she already has personal connections to some of you, so we decided to place her here. For the moment, she'll be acting as my assistant, but we intend to have her take over the class entirely as of next year.
Mule? What's gonna happen to you, Professor Samson?
The professor nodded at this question. Apparently, his name was Samson. That was news to me. It was almost impressive what a non-entity he was. I'll be heading back to my homeland next year. I no longer have a relative to look after in this class, after all.
Oh, yeah. Where did Ren go after she graduated anyway?
My little sister's serving as a magic knight back in the Duchy of Neris. It sounds like she's doing quite well for now, but there's no telling what she'll get up to if I'm not around to keep an eye on her.
Oh, gotcha.
I would only learn about all this later, but apparently it was common for the special class advisor to be an instructor with some personal connection to one or more of the students. Probably had something to do with how unpredictable they were. You'd want someone who could control them a little, or at least serve as the voice of restraint. Professor Sampson, who'd been in charge of us up until now, was the brother of a student who'd graduated the year before Cliff enrolled here. She was part of the ducal family of Neris, one of the 3 magic nations, and supposedly had a remarkable talent for magic. In any case, Roxy had personal connections to both me and Zenoba. She was essentially the perfect choice for the job. Stepping forward again, Roxy looked around the room and then began to speak.
I know I've already been introduced to some of you, but once again, my name is Roxy M. Greyrat. I'm the second wife of Rudeus Greyrat over there. I'll try not to let that influence my actions as a professor, but I hope you'll be understanding.
Cliff was pouting at this point. He'd probably wanted to hear the second wife thing from me directly. That way, he could have accepted the situation gracefully and earned my gratitude. But now his plans were ruined. Cliff,
Second wife? Is it? Is the word faithful not part of your vocabulary, Rudeus?
when I spoke to him, he immediately jumped into lecture mode. I know. I admit I proved myself lacking in the loyalty department.
I blessed your marriage to Sylphie because you told me you'd love her, and only her. You do remember that, don't you?
Of course, and I'm very grateful to you. Mushoku Tensei Volume 13 by Raifujin Namagone, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audio drama like this, please visit artale.ai and use promotion code ARTALE to activate your account. Now, enjoy the story.
Well, I suppose I knew from the start that you don't share my faith. I won't press the point any further. For what it's worth, you have my congratulations. I hope you're happy together.
Thanks, Cliff.
You know, I've run into your sister Norn in the city several times. She told me that she hoped to have a happy marriage like yours someday. Did she say anything to you when you brought your second wife home, I wonder?
She was very upset with me.
She'd been praying at church nearly every day for your safe return, and your father's. Ordinarily, your homecoming should have been a joyous occasion for her.
But in the end, she did forgive me.
Well, of course she did. She must have been afraid you'd kick her out of your house if she fought you too stubbornly.
I wouldn't do that to her, no matter what.
Of course, I know you wouldn't, but put yourself in the shoes of the more vulnerable party here. The girl just lost her father. You're the only person she can depend on now, you see? I think you really ought to try and be more considerate of her feelings as a family.
You're right.
You partners is only going to make your relationships more complicated. Women aren't objects to be collected, you know?
Man, he was hitting me where it hurt here. It felt like I was getting grilled by a stern old priest or something. The man could be intense when he wanted to. Right? Cliff?
What is it, Rudeus?
Still, there had been one part of this story that was brand new to me, and I owed him some gratitude. You were keeping an eye on Norn while I was away, weren't you? Thanks. I appreciate that.
I noticed her in the church one day, so we started talking a little, that's all. Oh, and on that note, you shouldn't be letting a girl that young wander around town so freely. This area is safe enough, but I've heard of kidnappers lurking in the back alleys.
You're right. I'll be more careful.
Very well, then. It seems you're appropriately repentant, so I suppose I'll forgive you for your mistakes. St. Millie's taught us to be lenient, after all.
Appreciate it, Cliff. Well, I'd been forgiven. Maybe this had been a confession rather than a conversation. Still, the man made a lot of good points. I was definitely feeling bad about how I treated Norn now. I'd have to be twice as kind to her from now on.
It seems like we're done with our personal discussions, yes? Let's proceed to the notices from the university, then.
With Cliff's lecture at an end, Professor Sanson delicately got homeroom underway again. Roxy had been standing at his side the whole time, looking supremely uncomfortable. I blew her a kiss, which earned me a small laugh, followed by a scowl of disapproval. For the next little while, my life proceeded along the old familiar lines. I checked in on Zenoba and Cliff regularly, dropped in to help Nanahoshi with her research, and used my free hours to work on my book or study the magic-absorbing stones I'd brought back from my last trip. As always, I had a lot to occupy my time with. I was kind of nostalgic for the days when I could devote an entire day to a single task, or maybe two. One thing that did change was the way I used my time immediately after classes ended. Previously, I'd been helping Norn with her studies, but now I was training her to use a sword instead. I was a little worried this change might have a negative effect on her academic results, but she'd promised me she'd work hard to stay on track, so I was willing to give her a chance. It felt best to let her pursue the things she was passionate about while she was most motivated. For the moment, I'm not going to get too deeply into any of that. Once I was ready to leave campus, I'd find both Sylphie and Roxy, and we'd head home together. When Sylphie had a night shift, it was just me and Roxy. And when Roxy had a faculty meeting in the evening, it was sometimes just me. Now and then, Norn would come along, too. On one particular evening, I found myself heading back with only Sylphie. We held hands as we strolled along and talked, mainly about recent events at the University of Magic. Apparently, the student council was going to be taking on a new member or two this term.
You should really join too, Rudy.
Don't think I have the spare time, sorry. It wasn't much of a conversation, but we were enjoying each other's company, not too blatantly, of course. We were in public. We're home. The moment I stepped inside the door, Aisha jumped forward and threw her arms around me.
Welcome back, Rudeus. Would you like dinner? Or a bath? Or maybe me?
Where did she learn that line? What a cliché. Oh wait, had I taught it to her? No. I remember teaching it to Sylphie, but not my own little sister. Declaring you, I proceeded to mercilessly tickle Aisha's armpits until she fled, cackling with laughter, and received a chop to the head from Lilia. After this little interlude, I headed straight for the bath. Aisha had included it on her list of options, but it wasn't ready and waiting for me or anything. They were still working on dinner too. In other words, you was the only actual option available. Oh well, whatever. Fortunately, Aisha always cleaned the bath for us during the day, so all I had to do was get the water running. I didn't take many baths on my own these days. At some point, we'd started using it two at a time. It was almost an unspoken rule at this point. I'd never really heard of a custom like that before, but whatever. Today, Aisha followed me into the bath. The girl was already 11 years old, but she still seemed to lack any sense of shame. If she ever got into a conversation with a hormonal young boy, the poor kid would probably get the wrong idea within minutes. Gently chiding, I keep telling you to cover up with a towel when you're coming into the bath, Aisha.
Why?
It's just polite.
Okay.
In this respect, at least, I was starting to wish Aisha could learn from her sister. Still, it was nice having a little sister. She liked to wriggle her way in between my legs and demand that I wash her back or rinse off her head, and it was always very cute. Good thing she was my sister, and also just a scrawny little kid, or I might have ended up with another wife on my hands. If Sylphie or Roxy ever tried the same stunt, I was confident I'd lose my self-control within seconds. Not that I'd really need to control myself in that situation. Anyway, I settled in to enjoy some pleasant family bonding time with my sister. The two of us washed each other off while Aisha told me about the events of the day. These were mostly trivial little things. Lucy had done something adorable. Zenith had helped out with the weeding. Lilia had dozed off next to a window. She'd planted something new in our garden. That sort of stuff. Oh, that reminded me, I'd entrusted that seed rice I got my hands on to Aisha and asked her to see if she could manage to grow it. She'd promised me to give it a shot once the weather got a little warmer. The kid was a genius, so I was feeling optimistic that I'd have my own private supply of rice before too long. I was really looking forward to it. By the time we got out of the bath, Roxy was just getting home, so we moved straight to dinner. Today we had a freshwater fish stew, bread, beans, and potatoes. The same as always, more or less. After the meal, I watched intently as Lucy suckled furiously at Sylphie's breast. Considering how quiet our baby was, she sure had a big appetite. It was hard to imagine Sylphie's daughter growing up too chubby, but I'd have to make sure she got some exercise once she was big enough. For a while after dinner, we relaxed as a family. I taught Aisha a little magic, and Roxy headed up to her room to prepare for tomorrow's classes. Sylphie was busy attending to Lucy, but sometimes she made the time to practice her own magic a little. Dillo, our pet armadillo, wandered over to me, so I gave him some attention. Incidentally, Aisha was responsible for taking care of him. She'd trained him thoroughly, and he was starting to act more like a loyal guard dog than anything else.
All right, then, I think it's time we got to bed.
Lilia and Zenith were usually the first to turn in for the night.
Good night.
Aisha went to bed early as well, though. Once I was done with her tutoring session, she usually went straight to sleep. Well then, you ready, Sylphie? And after the house fell silent, I invited my wife to our bedroom. Yes, she answered, blushing and lightly gripping the sleeve of my shirt. Naturally, this was more than enough to spur me into action. Picking her up, I carried her princess style up to bed. After that, well, we enjoyed our private time. Mentally and physically fulfilled, I fell into a solid sleep with my wife in my arms. Just a few minutes before that, though, I'd slipped quietly out of bed, careful not to wake Sylphie. I tiptoed my way down to the basement as quietly as I possibly could. Once I was there, I glanced behind me cautiously several times before opening a certain hidden door. Inside, I'd placed a small altar. My holy idols were enshrined there. To the uninitiated, they might have looked like nothing more than small bundles of cloth, but I knew that the divine spirits of Roxy and Sylphie dwelt within them. Tonight, like every other night, I offered up my prayers of gratitude. Legends of the University number 2, The Boss Can Make His Eyes Light Up. Chapter 3, Training with Norn. A month had passed. It was still cold out, but the snow was starting to melt, and you could actually see patches of ground here and there. One morning, I got out of bed as silently as possible, trying not to wake Sylphie. She liked to use my arm as a pillow, so it always took some finesse to extract myself. Heading over to a side room, I changed into my training wear, a lined outfit that looked a bit like a sweatsuit. Sylphie had picked it out for me. It was a little light for winter weather, but when you were exercising, that felt just about right. Once I'd gotten dressed, I picked up a stone sword that I'd left lying in a corner of the room. It was a thick, crude-looking thing. I'd made it myself with my earth magic. There was no actual edge to the blade, but it was unusually heavy. That made it a good way to practice with the strength of my new artificial left hand. I was actually starting to get a little attached to the thing. Maybe I'd give it a name one of these days. Something like tuna or swordfish. Come to think of it, I hadn't eaten anything like sashimi since my arrival in this world. Did nobody here eat fish raw or what? Once I was ready, I gently patted my sleeping wife on the head, silently mouthing the words, "See you later."
Hee hee.
Her eyes still closed. Sylphie smiled happily and rubbed her head against my hand. I guess she was half awake. It was pretty adorable, needless to say. Glancing down, I noticed that the covers were a little tangled, leaving her underwear-clad bottom exposed. I gave that a gentle patting, too. You'd never think this girl was already a mother, but then again, Elenai still had a good figure, too. Maybe it was genetic. After a moment's hesitation, I pulled the sheets back over Sylphie. We'd been getting back to our normal nighttime activities lately, but it felt a little early to be trying too hard for a second child, so I was trying to be a little more restrained, even if there was no guarantee it wouldn't happen anyway. As I left the room, Sylphie called out to me sleepily.
Nan.
Be back soon. Next, I headed to Norn's room. These days, she'd been joining me on my morning training. When she was staying at the house, we'd do it in the yard. When she was staying at the dorm, I'd meet her at the courtyard there. Today was one of her days at home. You ready, Norn? I knocked at the door, then started to open it.
Gah. Red.
Whoops, pardon me. She was still getting dressed, so I promptly closed it again. Norn's body still hadn't developed much. I liked slim, diminutive girls just fine, of course, but my little sisters just didn't do anything for me. Sometimes I found that slightly regrettable, but it was for the best. It was nice that I could be affectionate with them without feeling dirty about it. Still, the thought that Norn would probably get married someday did inspire a vaguely uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. Maybe this was what a father felt watching his daughter grow up? It wasn't so bad. I'd have to take Paul's place and berate her first boyfriend for her. I'm not giving Norn to a bum like you. Get lost!
Honestly, what's the point of knocking if you don't wait for me to say something?
As I was reflecting on all this, Norn emerged from her room in her exercise clothes, carrying a wooden sword in one hand. Her outfit was a plain, functional thing, with long sleeves on the top and bottom. It was the standard exercise gear from the university. I'd bought her a couple pairs from the school store. Glancing briefly past Norn into her room, I saw Paul's sword mounted high up on the wall. In my old world, she probably would have set up an altar with a picture of his face, but there weren't any cameras here. Without photographs, people tended to use mementos to remember those they'd lost. Norn, would you mind if I came into your room for a second?
Huh? Oh, that's fine, I guess.
I stepped inside. The bedroom smelled a bit like its occupant, the way they do first thing in the morning. If I dived into her bed and pressed my face against her wrinkled sheets, I could have filled my lungs with the scent of Norn. Not that I was going to. Standing right in front of Paul's sword, I put my hands together. Dad, Norn and I are going to be training again this morning. Keep an eye on us so we don't get hurt too badly, will you? Once I was done with my little prayer, I bowed my head slightly. How would Paul have responded to this anyway? Maybe something like, you'll never improve without a few injuries, you know? Or maybe just, you better not let Norn get hurt, damn it. Glancing over, I found Norn kneeling next to me with her hands together in the Milla style. I had a good view of the cute little whirl of hair on top of her head. It didn't matter what Paul would have said, really. He wasn't here anymore. I had to play his role now. I had a responsibility to take care of Norn to the best of my abilities. She didn't have anyone else to turn to after all. Okay then, want to get going?
Yes, I'm ready, Rudeus.
The two of us headed out to begin another session. The regimen was simple enough: calisthenics, running, and practice swings. I called this sword training, but at the moment, we were really just working on the fundamentals. Over the last few months, I'd been driving Norn hard to build up her basic stamina. When I say hard, though, I don't mean I had her doing the same routine as me. That would have been way too much for to handle. I'd started her off at 1/5 of my training regimen. Norn was only 11 years old, and she hadn't been too physically active prior to this, so there was only so much I could reasonably expect her to endure. While she did her practice swings in the yard, I finished up my own upper body exercises.
25, 26.
Swinging a sword at nothing in particular is a simple enough exercise, but that's part of the reason it takes some real willpower to keep going with it. Norn never quit halfway, though. I was proud of her for that. She was tougher than she looked.
50.
Okay, that's good. Nice work.
Ha.
Let's wash ourselves off and head back then. After training, the two of us headed into the bath together. Norn had an unfortunate tendency to trip and fall during our running sessions, which sometimes left her with scrapes or bruises on her knees. I made a habit of looking her over and cleaning them up with healing magic afterward. Sort of like kissing it to make it better, except it actually worked. Incidentally, Norn strongly objected to letting me see her naked, so she took these baths in her underwear and with a thin shirt on. I guess she was getting to that sensitive age. It was a pity she hadn't split that sense of modesty with Aisha. Of course, I always wore underwear and too to make Norn more comfortable. Still, sometimes I wondered how she'd react if I told her that some guys out there got more excited seeing a woman in a wet, semi-transparent shirt. Might be fun to see, but I was keeping the thought to myself. I didn't want her to banish me from bathing with her entirely. A big brother's got to maintain his dignity too. As I was reflecting on this, Norn shot me a look and pouted slightly.
It was just running and practice swings again today. When are you going to teach me how to use my sword?
I already am.
I'm not talking about just swinging it. I mean, the stances, the techniques.
So far, I'd been instructing Norn on how to run and swing her sword. Running would build her stamina, and practice swings would build her strength. Until she'd worked on both of those for a while, there was really no point in her learning techniques. That was how I'd figured it, at least. Let's see. The girl had been at it for months now, though. She'd probably made some progress. I gave Norn a looking over. She had the slender body of a growing kid. But compared to when we were just getting started, the muscles in her arms and legs were somewhat more defined. It was hard to say that she was in shape at this point, but a little exertion probably wasn't going to cause her any injuries. Maybe it was about time I got around to teaching her the most basic stances. I guess you're right. We'll get started for real after school today, okay?
Really?
Having rinsed off our sweat, the two of us left the bathroom together. That evening, I met Norn at the University of Magic's third external training field and exercise ground located near the edge of campus. I'd already changed into my training wear. My sister was in her exercise gear as well, and she already had her wooden sword in her hand. Her face was deadly serious. We didn't have the area to ourselves. There were a few robed students training nearby and others who looked to be out for a walk. We'd also attracted a few spectators, who were obviously curious as to why we were wearing our training clothes at this hour. It didn't matter if we had a crowd, though. Norn, we're going to start your real training as a swordswoman today.
Yes, sir!
The girl's face was shining with energy and enthusiasm. It was obvious how eager she was to learn real techniques. It had only been a few months since we started, but I guess the repetitive nature of our basic training had been wearing her down a little. Still, swinging a sword around in battle wasn't a game. You've got to get the fundamentals down first. Just so you know, I'm planning to be tough on you.
All right.
If we keep at it, you might end up getting upset with me. You might even start thinking I hate you. That's how harsh I'm going to be.
All right.
To be honest, I don't want to make you hate me. But a half-hearted instructor gets his students hurt. If I took it easy on you in training and then you ended up getting killed in your first real fight, I'd never be able to face our dad in heaven. Norn had no real talent with the sword, certainly not compared to Eris at the same age, at least. I wouldn't say she was any worse than the average 11-year-old, but strength can only be measured in relative terms. When you're fighting someone one-on-one, the stronger combatant wins and the weaker one dies. Losing isn't a valid option. For Norn to become capable of overcoming any actual threats, she'd need to put in a lot of effort. I needed to train her hard, and she needed to learn a few tricks too. At some point, this might start making you miserable. You might get frustrated with your lack of progress. You might see someone with more talent quickly pass you by. There's going to come a day when you feel like quitting. I do know how that feels, for the record. And I couldn't really blame you or anyone else for giving up in the face of adversity. Norn scowled a little at that. Not surprising, really. From her perspective, it probably looked like I was supremely talented at anything I tried. And in this body, I really was very capable at all sorts of things. But even so, I'd lost many battles. More than once, I'd nearly died. In a sense, Paul had died because I wasn't strong enough. I wanted more than anything to keep Norn safe from that sort of danger. That said, I don't want you to give up on the sword no matter what. If you do, I'll never teach it to you again, and I'll never let you use Dad's sword. As long as you keep at it, though, I won't give up on you either. Self-deprecating, kind of a cheesy speech, I know. Was I even showing that kind of determination myself, come to think of it? Well, I'd given up on getting much better with the sword, but I had kept up with my training every morning. I wanted to believe I wasn't a total hypocrite. Do you understand, Norn?
Yes, sir. I understand completely.
Norn's response was quick and forceful. She was looking up at me with flushed cheeks and determination in her eyes. I found myself wondering if I'd looked something like this to Paul back when I was little. Maybe Norn would end up following a similar path, leaving me behind and finding some other master to train her. Once I got her up to the beginner level, I could always send for Ghislaine or something. Assuming I found out where the woman was, there was also that Sword Sanctum place off to the west. If I offered enough money, maybe I could lure a Sword Saint away to teach her for a while. Glad to hear it. We'll start off with some running then.
Huh? Are we training with the sword tonight?
Yeah, of course. You're running with your sword in your hands this time. You have to carry it around everywhere on the battlefield after all. I'm waiting for a reply.
Sir? Yes, sir.
Today, our regimen would consist of running, a review of the 3 basic forms, and a brief sparring session. My intention was to give her a very hard time. She needed to understand this could be painful and scary stuff. I don't think pain's an essential part of the learning process or anything, but I felt like it was best for her to realize up front how tough this could be. There was a chance I'd make her cry. There was a chance she'd hate my guts after tonight. But even so, I needed to turn my heart to stone. Swordplay wasn't the kind of thing you pursued as a fun hobby. That was a surefire way to end up dead the first time you faced an actual threat. All right, Norn, follow me.
Yes, sir.
Still feeling a bit anxious, despite myself, I set off at a run. Okay, that's good enough for today.
Thank you, sir.
As the setting sun shone down on us, Norn collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. I want you to practice the 3 basic forms I taught you today when you have the time. In the morning, at lunchtime, whenever. Even when I'm not around.
Yes, sir.
For our first real training session, it had gone decently. Once our running was over, I'd launched directly into reviewing the basic forms or movements. After that, I'd thrown her right into a sparring match against me using wooden swords. I'd corrected her stance and foot movements as we went. It probably wasn't nearly as complex as the kind of training you'd get from a kendo instructor back in Japan, but this world didn't have many rules for its swordsmen to learn. Really, when you got down to it, learning how to fight with a sword is mostly about getting in a lot of practice. Paul had started smacking me around fairly early in our sessions, and Ghislaine had spent a great deal of time sparring with Eris too. I felt like I had the right general idea. Norn seemed to be very reluctant to actually take a swing at someone with a wooden sword, so I started off by letting her swing at me freely to help her get over that. I didn't even defend myself, apart from moving my body so that she didn't hurt me. She grimaced every time she felt her sword strike home, but I tried very hard to keep a calm, composed look on my face. I wanted her to believe that I could take her blows just fine. I think it worked. Probably. Since she'd spent the last several months doing lots of practice swings, her strikes had a decent amount of force behind them. I'd probably have some nasty bruises. After that, we got to the actual sparring. I smacked Norn around with my sword for a while, then called an end to the session. I took it easy on her, of course, but her arms and legs would definitely be turning black and blue before too long. In other words, I'd done harm to my sweet little sister. A part of me was already wondering if I'd made the right choice here. Still, Norn kept swinging back at me to the bitter end. She didn't surrender or complain, much less break down in tears. As long as she had this level of motivation, basically any kind of training would be productive. What do you think, Norn? That hurt, didn't it?
Yes.
Was it too much to take? Do you want to quit?
No. I want to train tomorrow.
All right. To be honest, I wasn't too confident in my own ability as a teacher, but if magic was comparable to an academic subject, swordsmanship was more like a sport. There wasn't really one correct answer, and if you wanted to improve, you had to just keep at it. Come here, Norn. I'll heal you up. I was intending to sit Norn down on the ground and use my magic to ease her pain. If she had any bruises under her clothes, I'd have to ask Sylphie to do the honors later. Then again, Norn was going to be coming home to stay with us tonight. so maybe I could do it if we took another bath together. I approached my sister and took off her jacket to get a better look at her arms. But then, I sensed that we were being watched. Turning around, I saw a group of male students staring at us, illuminated by the setting sun. How long have those guys been there? From the start, maybe? I'd assumed they were just curious onlookers, but if they'd stuck around this long, they probably had a reason for their loitering. Maybe they wanted something from me. Norn, get dressed and wait for me, okay? I'll walk home with you today.
Huh? Right. Okay, Rudeus.
I cast a few quick healing spells on Norn, then bustled her off toward the changing room. Once she was safely inside, I headed over to the group of boys. As I drew closer, I realized there were more than 10 of them. None of them looked like the popular kind of kid. That was good. Maybe we could understand each other. They were staring at me with open hostility in their eyes, though. When I gazed right back at them, a few looked away awkwardly. At this point, I was a normie with 2 wives and a kid, but that didn't mean I felt any scorn for these guys. I wasn't much different from them in my life, after all. Not that that stopped them from feeling intimidated. Do you need something, guys? They looked at each other for a moment, then started whispering and pushing each other on the back. Eventually, one member of the group stepped forward. The boy looked to be maybe 18 years old. He was about as tall as me, but looked gangly and out of shape. His cheeks were bony, and his eyes were kind of shifty. The classic magician type, I guess. If you put a pair of glasses on his head, he might look a bit like Zenoba. Of course, Zenoba was always full of that bizarre confidence of his. This guy looked more like the self-loathing, resentful type.
Why are you bullying Norn?
Bullying? I could feel my brow furrowing at the sound of that word. The young mage flinched at my reaction, but continued nonetheless.
Look, I know Norn's clumsy and messes things up sometimes. Maybe she accidentally ticked you off somehow. But she tries her best at everything she does, okay? Did you really have to take it out on her like that?
From behind him, the group muttered words of agreement.
In the first place, Norn's never even held a sword before. She didn't even know how to defend herself. I don't know what she did, but making her fight you was just too harsh.
The group concurred again, a little more loudly this time. Harem. From the sounds of things, they seemed to believe that I'd forced that sword into Norn's hands, then beat her up for my own enjoyment under the pretense of training her. It was basically the opposite of the truth, but you could understand why they'd reached that conclusion. I wasn't a very skilled instructor, for one thing. In any case, I needed to clear up this misunderstanding. Well, you see,
I know you're the strongest mage in this entire school, but if you're going to mistreat Norn like that, we're still going to fight you for her sake.
the guy was really working up a head of steam now. There was real determination in his voice. But the chorus of approval from his friends was a lot quieter this time. In fact, I heard someone mutter, "I don't think I agreed to that," from the back. It's sad, but guys like us aren't particularly tough in groups either. Ha, right. Before I explained myself, there was one thing I needed to understand. Okay, can I ask who you people are, exactly?
Huh?
His voice cracking. The young mage looked back to his friends for guidance. After a moment, he turned to face me again with an awkward look on his face.
Huh? What do you mean exactly?
I'm asking how you know my little sister. Are you her friends or something?
No, we just noticed her last year when she was a freshman. She always, does her best at everything, so we're kind of rooting for her, I guess.
The guy was stammering now, but once he got these words out, his friends started chiming in as well. I noticed her on campus about 6 months ago. I'm in the same year as Norn. We had practical lessons together, and she kept messing up her fire spell over and over, but I saw her getting all teary-eyed while this instructor scolded her during magic training, and They spoke clumsily and never seemed to actually finish their sentences. But I still got the general idea. These guys had seen Norn in her classes or training sessions. They'd seen her tearing up as she failed repeatedly, but kept struggling nonetheless. And it had warmed their hearts. At some point, they'd banded together to try and offer her a little subtle support from the sidelines. In other words, Norn had a fan club. Come to think of it, I felt like Sylphie had mentioned something about this to me at some point. It was understandable. Norn was adorable, after all. I could see where they were coming from. As Norn's brother, I wanted to encourage their efforts. I think I understand the situation now. Thanks for looking out for Norn, everyone. I'm Rudeus Greyrat, her big brother. When I lowered my head in gratitude, a surprised murmur ran through the little crowd. These guys were on Norn's side. Some of them might be capable of taking things too far, but as a group they seemed to have nothing but good intentions. It was only right for me to treat them with respect. That said, I did still need to definitively clear up this misunderstanding. As for our training session just now, I know it looked like I was treating her harshly. However, learning the sword isn't a game. It can be a matter of life and death. I proceeded to go over the entire situation in detail. Firstly, I explained that the whole thing was Norn's idea. Secondly, I told them that it was dangerous to learn swordplay unless you took it very seriously. And finally, I emphasized that Norn needed to work much harder at it than most people would. The fan club was a little taken aback at first, but after a while they seemed to understand where I was coming from. Still, I did hear someone mutter, "Did you really have to hit her that hard, though?" It was a fair question. I wasn't sure that my methods were correct either. All I wanted them to understand was that I wasn't picking on Norn maliciously. I continued my explanation at length, trying to convey my motivations. The faces of the fan club members slowly grew more serious as they listened, and by the end they were nodding reluctantly. These guys were still young, but by the standards of this world they were all adults. They were capable of understanding how deadly serious it was to go into actual battle.
Rudeus? Is something the matter?
Just as we were reaching an understanding, Norn had returned. She was wearing something like a poncho over her standard school uniform. "Oh, it's Norn! Hello, Norn! You look cute today, as always! Nice job out there, Norn." The instant my sister arrived, everyone in her fan club got remarkably creepy. Still, I could understand how they felt. She was adorable in that outfit. So adorable, I found myself picturing her carrying around a leaf umbrella.
Oh, hello there. Everyone, thank you.
Norn flinched in surprise at the sudden barrage of encouragement, then bowed her head respectfully. I noticed she wasn't getting too close to them, though. I guess she was picking up on the weird vibes here, too.
Rudeus, I think I forgot something in my room. I'll go grab it now, so just wait for me at the school gates, okay?
Just like that, Norn turned and rushed off toward the dorms. Before she got too far, though, she tripped and fell.
Good.
Norn was a little slow getting up, and once she was back on her feet, she looked back at me for just a moment. Her eyes were glistening. "Maybe you shouldn't be running right after you exercised, kid. Once we got back home, I'd have to give her a massage to help control the muscle pain. She'd need a nice, long, relaxing bath, too." "Ah, she is so adorable. Don't run so fast, Norn. You're wearing a skirt, remember?" I thought the school uniform was a stupid idea at first, but I think I understand the appeal now. She's an awful slow runner, though. Yeah, if a kidnapper tried to snatch her, she might not get away. If Norn went on the slave market, I'd buy her in a minute. Yeah, I'd buy Norn too. Then I'd take her back home, make her a nice big meal. I'd fill her up with good food and insist she clean her plate. Oh, I can just see her struggling to finish it all off. Wait, no! Mom was my little sister. I wasn't going to let anyone buy her on the damn slave market. If someone dared to kidnap her, I'd hunt them down and murder them painfully. Sound good, Dad? Huh. Gah! I cleared my throat loudly, prompting the members of the fan club to snap out of their disturbing fantasies. Guys, I need you to not talk about enslaving my little sister. Thanks.
Sorry.
It's all right, I know she's adorable. You can have your little daydreams at least, as long as you keep a safe distance from her.
Oh.
Everyone seemed to relax a little at that. Yeah, but if you lay so much as a finger on her, you're gonna seriously regret it. Eek, it never hurt to be clear about these things. I didn't think anyone here was capable of getting up to real mischief, and groups like this tended to have a moderating effect on their members, but you never know what someone might do on impulse. The last thing I needed was one of them getting overheated and trying to snatch Norn off the street. On another note, what rules has your club agreed on so far?
Huh? Our club?
Yeah, this is Norn's fan club, right? What's your policy on interacting with her? It was very important to have a clear set of guidelines. Generally, the fans agreed not to approach their idol directly, but I'd heard of some cases where people allowed themselves to ask for handshakes or autographs. The handshake thing was dicey territory, though. Sometimes, guys would put weird stuff on their palms first, like gum or sea urchins. I wanted to make sure that sort of thing was officially forbidden.
Norns? What? What's a fan club?
To my surprise, though, the guys didn't seem to understand what I was talking about. It was almost like they'd never even heard of these concepts before. How strange. Wait a second, guys. Who's the person in charge of this group?
In charge? We don't really have anyone in charge.
Seriously? I need you to explain in detail, please. Strangely enough, it turned out that this group hadn't actually been formed by anyone in particular. They'd been drawn together naturally by their shared appreciation for Norn's cuteness. Many of them didn't even know each other's names. I see. This was a very dangerous situation. What we had here was an unorganized mob of uncertain size, united only by an interest in my little sister. In mobs, people are capable of doing things they wouldn't have the guts to try on their own. For example, kidnapping my adorable little sister and blaming her for being too cute to resist. Unacceptable! Outrageous! Scandalous! This isn't good, guys. At this rate, you're going to turn into a bunch of criminals.
Criminals? No, we just...
Sorry, but I know I'm right about this. One of you is going to cross the line eventually. Not surprisingly, this inspired a storm of denials and protests. Don't be ridiculous. None of us would ever lay a hand on Norn. I mean, we like Norn a lot, but it's more like she's our little sister or something. Say what, punk? She's my little sister, and I'm not sharing. Wait. Let's try to stay on topic. I believe you guys mean well, but I think we need to set some clear rules here. When you wanted to keep a group of people from getting out of control, you had to establish some basic regulations. Once the rules were in place, the members of the group would start keeping an eye on each other. Rules arise naturally with time. They come into existence when they're needed and fade away when they are. This fan club didn't have much of a history yet. There hadn't been enough time for its rules to develop organically. But until they created some, Norn was in danger. I needed to speed up the process artificially. I wasn't going to wait around for them to hurt her first. Somebody needed to make some fundamental decisions right now. Fortunately, the issues themselves were relatively simple and clear-cut. They just needed to promise not to scare Norn or put her at risk. The problem was finding someone to actually propose those rules. It would usually be the leader of the group, but these people didn't have one. The guy who'd step forward to challenge me was probably the most strong-willed. Could I appoint him as the boss and let him set the rules? Definitely not. The leader had to understand the responsibility they were taking on and accept it willingly. Randomly dropping power in someone's lap was never a good idea. Who understood the gravity of this situation best, then, who here cared most deeply about Norn's well-being? Me. Obviously. All right then. Norn was my little sister, too. My own flesh and blood. In other words, I was the lawgiver here. In the year 425 of the Armored Dragon era, a certain organization was founded in the Renoa University of Magic. Its name, the Norn Grey Rat Official Fan Club. This group, boasting some 30 members in total, would go on to leave an indelible mark on the history of the university. The name of its first president, however, is lost to history. Legends of the University number 3. The boss can summon 30 flunkies with a single word. Chapter 4. Can I keep him? Let's talk about Aisha for a moment. The girl was doing well. Despite the tragedies that had befallen our family, she seemed as bright and energetic as ever. I never caught her gazing sadly out the windows like her mother sometimes did. She didn't bite her lip when she looked at Paul's sword the way Norn would. She did her housework cheerfully as if nothing had changed. During the day, she tended her flowers in the garden and in her room, At night, she threw herself into my magic lessons and cuddled up with me happily had to be Hayo and gardening in her room. At night, she threw herself into my magic lessons. It almost seemed like she was more energetic than before. She was probably the single least melancholy person in our entire house. Sometimes, it almost felt like she wasn't mourning Paul at all. I couldn't help wondering if he hadn't meant that much to her. That said, Norn didn't remember much from our time at Buena Village, so it seemed possible that Aisha didn't have many memories of Paul or Zenith either. Just as Norn had spent many years on the road with Paul, Aisha had spent most of her childhood with Lilia. All things considered, it wasn't fair for me to expect her to act all gloomy. Maybe her joy at Lilia's safe return overweighed her sadness at Paul's death. If so, it was probably for the best. It wasn't like I wanted my sister moping around instead of enjoying life after all. One day, I had nothing in particular to do. My classes weren't meeting that day, but unfortunately Roxy and Sylphie both had to work. I was planning to look after Lucy and spend the day relaxing. I felt a little guilty about lazing around the place while both my wives were hard at work, but grown-ups need to get their rest in when they can, right? I'm not earning any money at the moment, though. Is that really okay? Considering I've got a baby and all, well, getting my education is the best way to earn more money later, right? Yeah, it's all good. After seeing off my wives, I checked in on Lucy. She was still sound asleep, so I wandered out into the garden for no particular reason. When we first moved in here, there was nothing out here but a barren, neglected patch of earth. But now, after only a few years, it had been transformed completely. First of all, we now had 3 big evergreen trees back there. One of them flowered in spring, the second in summer, and the third in autumn. Not that I'd seen them blooming for myself yet. When I'd asked Aisha where she got them, she explained that she placed a request with the Adventurers Guild and had them brought here from the nearest forest. Transporting full-grown trees sounded like a real hassle, so I asked her how much it had cost. She said Zenoba had helped out, so she only had to cover the cost of a few bodyguards. In one corner of the garden, there was a section of soil separated from the rest by brick dividers. This was where Aisha had planted the rice seeds I'd brought back with me. So far, the first crop seemed to be sprouting nicely. Aisha was squatting down by that small field at the moment. To my surprise, Zenith was sitting next to her. "What are you two doing?"
Oh, hi, Rudeus! We're weeding the rice.
For a second, I thought she was joking, but then I walked over and realized it was true. Aisha was pulling weeds out from between the stalks of rice, and Zenith was quietly helping out as well. Now that I thought about it, I had some vague memories of Zenith pulling weeds back in Buena Village. Maybe it was just a standard part of growing plants, even in a cold climate like this.
Miss Zenith wanted to help out, too.
Something about the Miss Zenith thing didn't sit quite right with me. Aisha, you can call Mother Zenith Mom if you want, you know?
Matter of fact, nah. Mother Lilia said I can't. She always says I have to call her Miss Zenith or Madam.
Ah, so it was another one of Lilia's commandments. She was sure strict about this stuff. Then again, I felt like Aisha didn't really think of Zenith as a mother anyway. For the record, Zenith had treated her just like one of her own children back when she was a baby, but Aisha obviously couldn't remember that. Well, whatever. It wasn't that big a deal either way. How long has Mother Zenith been helping you out like this?
For a while now, actually. Mother Lilia tried to stop her at first, but she always comes over to help when I start messing around in the garden. She's better at it than I am.
Zenith had put a lot of effort into maintaining our garden back in Buena Village, too. Maybe that had something to do with this. I wasn't going to discourage it either way. You never knew what might help her regain her memories. In any case, it was kind of nice seeing her and Aisha sitting side by side like this. They looked content in each other's company. Even if they weren't blood-related, I guess Zenith was still Aisha's mother.
Oh, right. Rudeus, you're off today, right?
As I watched them working, Aisha turned back to look at me. Her cheek was smudged with mud. Yeah, I'll be at home all day.
Great. There's something I want to show you. Can you come by my room later?
Sure thing, I said, bending down to wipe her face. Aisha smiled doppily as I cleaned her off. Zenith looked on from beside her, staring at us both intently. There's something I want to show you. Can you come by my room later? A very suggestive line, I'm sure you'll agree. Aisha was a very precocious kid. There was a possibility she'd lift up her skirt and try to show me her private parts or something. Well, maybe not, on second thought. We already took baths together on a regular basis. She didn't have anything under there I wasn't already familiar with. Still, the kid was so shameless that I was starting to get a little worried about her future. Maybe I should be giving her some basic sex ed lessons at this point. Wait, didn't she say Lilia had gone over all that with her? Okay, but what if she taught her a bunch of nonsense? I should really step up to the plate here. Frowning slightly as I considered the proper course of action, I stepped inside Aisha's room. She told me to stop by later, but she hadn't specified a time. It shouldn't be a problem if I waited for her here then. It's not like I just wanted to get a look around a young girl's room or anything. Although I was a little curious, maybe. Well, looks like she keeps the place clean at least. Aisha's room was impressively tidy. Everything was put away in its proper place, and I couldn't see a single speck of dust anywhere. Her bed was neatly made too. Here and there I noticed a few slightly girly touches. The stuffed toy on her bed was particularly conspicuous. It was a little guy, maybe 20 centimeters in height, with light brown hair, a robe, and a staff. He was supposed to be a magician, presumably. They didn't sell toys like these in this city as far as I knew. Had she bought it from a traveling peddler or something? I don't even think Zenoba had anything like this in his collection, and that meant it had to be a pretty rare find. Maybe she made it herself? Nah, surely not. Aisha also had quite a few potted plants by her windows, everything from tulip-like flowers to aloes and a little cactus. There were maybe 10 of them lined up together in pots of various sizes. Compared to Norn's room, the place looked a bit more like what you'd expect from a young girl's room. Wandering over to the corner, I opened up Aisha's closet and took a peek. There were 3 full maid outfits inside. All of them were obviously well used and had some conspicuous patches here and there. They looked more like the clothes of a veteran maid than those of an 11-year-old kid. Aisha had been growing fast lately, so she'd presumably grow out of these entirely before too long. Unless Lilia could modify them somehow. Glancing around again, I noticed a single cute, girly outfit hanging on the far side of the closet. It had lots of frills and everything. Maybe she was saving it for a special occasion? Hopefully this wasn't what she'd been wanting to show me. I'd have to pretend I hadn't already seen it. Closing the closet, I pulled open the drawer underneath it. One side of it was packed with neatly folded panties. For any boy with a crush on her, this would have been a real treasure trove. Next to her underwear were a number of shirts, and now that I got a closer look, few bras too. My little sister was well developed for her age and already capable of equipping chest armor. Still, she was probably the equivalent of an A-cup at the moment. The wise old hermit had already classified her as a rare gem in the making, but it was early days yet. As I was contemplating my sister's clothes, a small thump from behind made my heart skip a beat. Activating my demon eye of foresight, I channeled mana into both my hands and spun around, making sure to close the drawer behind me. Who's there? There was nothing there. No one I could see. Aisha and Zenith would still be occupied with the garden at the moment, and Lilia should be busy making lunch. Was it our pet armadillo, then? No, he'd tagged along with Roxy when she headed to the university. He was probably taking a siesta in some stable over there. Matsukaze, the horse I'd bought before leaving for Begarit, was housed in a stable in the city. Sometimes I'd head over there to check up on him, but I doubted he could make it all the way over here on his own. That just left Lucy, and she wasn't even crawling yet. Was it someone totally unexpected then? A burglar? A pervert looking to steal an innocent young girl's first bra? Lowering myself cautiously into a crouch, I glanced all around the room. I wasn't seeing anyone, and there weren't any good hiding places, either. Still, something felt odd. My sharply honed intuition was telling me I wasn't alone in here. Could it be an invisible enemy? Maybe someone with a magical implement that provided perfect camouflage. In that case, the effect would have to wear off sooner or later in Suf. Subcommissar Josh Justam mouthed the tone, but I'd passion to pay it to someone with a magical implement that provided perfect I guess we'll just have to see who blinks first then. Hopefully it wasn't just the house creaking or anything. I'd feel like a real idiot. No. There's definitely something off. I can feel it. Look closer, Rudeus. What's changed in here? What's out of place? The stuffed toy? No, it's not that. The door's still closed. The bed's still made. The ceiling's spotless as always. That leaves the potted plants. Yeah. Are there more of them than before? I don't think so, but I feel like I'm getting warmer here. As I stared at the plants, trying to find something out of the ordinary, the sun emerged from behind a cloud. A ray of light poured through Aisha's window. The plant in the single smallest pot reacted instantly. It was wriggling around in there, trying to get more of itself in the sunbeam, twisting its leaves toward the window. With its every movement, the pot thumped slightly against the wooden windowsill. This was obviously what I'd heard a few moments ago as well. What the heck is this thing? I gave the plant a cautious poke, and it jerked in something like surprise. After a moment, though, it leaned over to rub itself against my finger and began to slowly twine a shoot around it. A little taken aback, I pulled my finger away. The plant promptly went right back to bathing in the sun. A moving plant? How very bizarre. Hopefully it wasn't going to start dancing around the room and burst into song or anything. In all seriousness, though, I had some idea what this thing might be. I'd seen its kind many times before, after all. This thing was a trent. The creatures known as triants could be found all over the world. They were one of the most common and well-known categories of monster. You might compare them to the slimes from Dragon Quest, in that sense. I'd done a lot of traveling for my age, with journeys across the Demon Continent, the Millis Continent, the Central Continent, and the Begarit Continent. I hadn't gotten a chance to visit the Divine Continent yet, unfortunately, but that was still 4 out of the major 5. On every one of the continents I'd seen so far, there were trents of some kind. You'd find them in basically any forest, and they weren't uncommon in the plains and deserts either. Most of them were largely made of wood, but not all of them looked like walking trees. The stone trants resembled big, lumpy potatoes. The cactus trants looked like spiky green plants, and there were many other species too. I'd heard of elder trents capable of using water magic, for example. Still, I'd never seen a trent this small before. The thing was about 15 centimeters in height, maybe 20 if you counted its roots. It had 4 large leaves and 2 tendril-like shoots. I didn't see any flowers or fruits yet. It looked like a very young sapling, maybe. Accordingly, I decided to refer to it as a baby tree. Not that it really mattered. I just needed some way to refer to it. Now then, my main question at the moment was what our baby Trent was doing in Aisha's room. Okay, Aisha, what's the deal with this thing?
Well, it just started moving all of a sudden.
Aisha, who'd come running at my cry of alarm, didn't appear to feel particularly guilty about the situation. When did that happen?
Right after you came back from your trip, actually. What do you think? It's pretty cool, right?
If anything, she seemed proud of her little pet. Yeah, it's really something. Why didn't you tell me about this, though?
I wanted to, but you've been so busy lately, you know? I thought it could wait a while, and now you went and found it on your own.
Aisha puffed out her cheeks sulkily. The effect was adorable, needless to say. Now I knew what she'd wanted to show me, at least. Well, anyway, I can't believe one of those seeds I brought back was actually a Trent. What are the odds of that?
No. I'm pretty sure it grew from some Vadarus seeds we got back in Asura.
Oh! Really?
Yeah, it's got leaves and tendrils, see? It should get some nice purple flowers before too long.
I recognized the name of the plant. Its flowers were the primary ingredient in a powerful aphrodisiac, and it could also be used to make certain perfumes. They cultivated it in certain parts of the kingdom of Asura. That didn't explain why this one had turned into a treant, though. What made it start moving, anyway? Was it like this from the start?
Nope, it was just a plant at first. It started moving when I moved it into this pot.
Aisha explained that she liked starting off her flowers in the garden outside before moving them into her pots. Once they grew big enough, she put them back into the yard. She was still experimenting at the moment, which was why the pots and the plants inside them were all so different. The pot itself was a perfectly ordinary thing that we purchased together at a general goods store a while ago. I found it very unlikely that it was a magic item or otherwise enchanted. You didn't do anything weird to it, did you?
Nope. I treated it just like all the others. I'm using the soil you make for me. It seems to have more nutrients than the earth around here does.
That probably ruled out the soil then. I always made her perfectly ordinary dirt with my magic. It wasn't something I put a lot of effort into. Maybe I threw a touch of affection for my little sister in there, but that didn't seem relevant.
Oh, wait. Sometimes I give it leftover water from the bath, I guess.
Leftover bath water. I wasn't around at the time, so it would have been infused with Sylphie and Aisha's sweat, maybe a bit of Nanahoshi's too. Intriguing. I could see how that might lead a plant to grow some gropey tentacles. Huh. Okay, Rudeus, stop being an idiot. What could have caused this to happen then? She'd planted a normal seed and cultivated it normally, but somehow it had turned into a monster. Was that a thing that just happened sometimes? It felt more likely that a Trent seed had been accidentally mixed in with the normal ones somehow. Trents were natural mimics. Maybe it was just pretending to be a normal Vaterus plant at first to stay inconspicuous. It felt like a coherent theory, at least. Well, in any case, I guess we should kill the thing. Maybe I could just burn it or something.
What? I spent all this time raising the little guy. Why would you burn him?
I was a bit taken aback by how fiercely she objected, but then again, she brought me here to show off her Trent. I guess it made sense that she wouldn't be too happy about getting rid of it. Aisha, you know what this thing is, right? It's a Trent. That's a kind of monster.
But look how little it is. It's adorable.
Yeah, for the moment, but once it gets bigger, it might start attacking people. It's dangerous.
I'll train him. I'll make sure he doesn't hurt anyone.
She was clinging to my waist desperately now, and there were tears in her eyes. I was sorely tempted to just say, "Oh, all right. I'm not cleaning up after it for you, though." Still, this wasn't a stray kitten we were talking about here. It was a monster.
Come on, Rudeus. Can't I keep it? Please.
The puppy dog eyes aren't going to work on me. We need to get rid of it.
But he's a good boy, really. He's nice to everyone else, and he does whatever I tell him to.
Now you're just making stuff up, Aisha. How is a Trent going to do what you tell it? It doesn't even have ears.
Look.
Trotting over to the baby Trent, Aisha reached out a hand toward it. The little creature reacted by slowly slipping one of its tendrils around her slender index finger. Without extracting herself from its grip, she gently rubbed the underside of its leaves with her fingertips, and the baby Trent twisted its body in something that looked like pleasure. It was kind of a bizarre sight. The thing looked exactly like a plant, but it was reacting like an animal.
Okay, let go.
The Trent immediately uncoiled its tendril from around her finger, letting it rest in the palm of her hand.
Which one's the pinky finger?
After a moment's hesitation, the tendril slipped around her pinky.
Middle finger.
The tendril released her pinky and took hold of her middle finger.
Don't let go, but grab my thumb, too.
Still wrapped around the middle finger, the tendril reached out further, obediently stretching toward Aisha's thumb. It wasn't long enough to grab it, but it just barely managed to touch her fingertip. Okay, let go! She kept playing with the treant this way for a while longer, then turned back to face me.
See? He listens to what I tell him, right?
Yeah, it looks that way. To my surprise, it was clearly possible to communicate with this thing, and from the looks of things, it was very attached to my little sister. I needed to rethink things a little here. Trents were monsters. That was just a fact. In my experience, they disguised themselves as trees or other plants, then launched vicious surprise attacks on any travelers who came by. Still, I knew there were some species of monsters out there that could be domesticated. Creatures like Dillo, our family pet, and the lizard I rode around on the demon continent weren't usually thought of as monsters. People usually just called them beasts. But there was nothing that inherently separated them from monsters other than their temperament. This baby Trent seemed tame enough, so maybe I didn't have to classify it as a monster. It honestly wasn't that threatening either. Dillo could surely do a lot more damage than this thing if he wanted to. That said, Dillo had been domesticated by a professional beast trainer. Look, I'm a little worried this thing might try to strangle you in your sleep, honestly.
I think it should be fine, Rudeus. Even full-grown Voterus plants only get about twice this big.
Okay. But
If he hurts anyone, ever, I'll do what you say. I promise.
what if you get seriously injured the first time he attacks, though? Aisha puffed out her cheeks sulkily at this, but then seemed to reconsider her strategy. Opening her eyes real wide, she laced her hands together in front of her chest and looked up at me with her most sweet and innocent expression.
Please, Rudeus, can't you give me a chance?
Where the heck did she learn to plead like that? Not subtle, kid. I was tempted to pursue the point, but right now there were more pressing matters at hand. Okay, let's see. I was positive I'd never heard of anyone domesticating a Trent before. I didn't know much about their behavior either, so it was hard to say what the best way to train one was. Most importantly, they were dangerous monsters, albeit fairly weak ones. If we mess this up even slightly, things might turn ugly very fast. Then again, if it really was going to max out at 30 centimeters in height, there wasn't that much it could do to hurt us. Aisha had raised this thing herself from a seed, so was accustomed to having people around. That made it less likely it would attack one of us, assuming it was like an ordinary animal in that respect. Clearly irritated by my indecisiveness, Aisha began to pout.
All right then. If that's how you're going to be, maybe I should play my trump card.
Your trump card?
Why don't I tell Sylphie and Roxy about your little...
What are you talking about? Was I keeping any terrible secrets from the two of them? Nothing really came to mind. But then, smirking haughtily, Aisha dropped the bomb on me.
I'm talking about your secret room in the basement.
Gah! Everyone has a part of themselves they want to keep private. In my case, it was that little altar downstairs. That room was a sacred place that I visited only in the night, offering my prayers as my family slumbered. My goddesses were now physically present in my house, true, but that didn't make the ritual any less meaningful for me. Faith has value in and of itself, you know. The act of prayer calms us and centers us, helping us live each day to the fullest. I've been keeping up this routine for years now. It was a part of my life. But what would happen if my altar was discovered? What would Sylphie think? What would Roxy say? I wanted to think that Lilia would understand, at least. Aisha had evidently been keeping quiet about it, but what about Norn? I had the feeling she'd react with open disgust. The ultimate outcome would likely be the destruction of my altar, and with it, I would lose a crucial part of my daily routine. Aisha, listen. I'm just worried about your safety, okay? Trents are dangerous monsters, so raising one might put you at risk.
I don't care if you're a total pervert, Rudeus, but I wonder how Sylphie and Roxy will feel about it. Especially Roxy. You've been worshipping her panties for a Lulin time now, haven't you?
Ah, this girl is ruthless. I was just trying to watch out for her, and now she's blackmailing me. Damn it, what am I supposed to do? What's the least bad option here? As I racked my brains for an answer, the door to Aisha's bedroom suddenly swung open behind us.
I think I heard my name just now. Did you need something?
Gah!
Gah.
Aisha and I spun around to find Roxy standing in the doorway looking a bit nonplussed. What are you doing here, Roxy? Didn't you just leave a little while ago?
I came back to get something I forgot. Fortunately, I don't have a class at the moment.
Classic Roxy. The forgetful little professor. How cute. Wait, let's try to stay focused here.
Well, Roxy, Rudeus, and I were just talking about his secret...
Now I'd gone and covered up my little sister's mouth mid-sentence. What now? An awkward silence ensued. The only sounds were the soft thumps of the baby Trent wriggling on the windowsill. Roxy's eyes jumped over to it and opened wide with surprise. Okay, maybe I can turn to this to my advantage. Roxy should take my side on this, right? I'm sure she knows how dangerous Trents are.
That's a Trent, isn't it?
Right? Yeah. Aisha just told me she wants to raise that thing as a pet. But Trents are monsters, you know? It could be dangerous. Can you help me convince her to get rid of it? Aisha grabbed at my hand, which was muffling her cries of protest, and tried to pry it away. Foolish girl. You can't beat me in a contest of strength. Bite my fingers if you want. I won't let go. Gah, wait. Don't lick them. Stop. That's fightin' dirty.
I don't know, Rudy. I think it should be fine.
Huh? She's taking Aisha's side?
Trents are loyal creatures if you raise them properly. And this one's rather small, too. There shouldn't be much danger to speak of.
Wait, really? You can domesticate them?
Sure, it doesn't seem to be very common on this continent, but the Migad tribe used Trents to scare birds away from their fields.
Did they really? Maybe. My memories of that visit were a little fuzzy at this point. Oh, right! They had those things that looked like piranha plants out in the fields. I hadn't realized they were trans, though. In any case, it sounded like Aisha was right after all, so I released her from my clutches. Sorry, Aisha. Sounds like I was wrong about this one. She looked at me dubiously for a moment, but eventually smiled in relief.
That's okay, Rudeus. You were just worried about me, right?
Yeah, of course. You have to admit, raising a monster sounds like it could be dangerous.
Okay, then. I guess I'll keep quiet after all.
Thanks, Aisha. Remind me to buy you a nice meal one of these days.
Will do.
Spinning away from me, Aisha promptly ran over to Roxy and threw her arms around her.
Thanks, big sis. I love you.
You're welcome, I suppose.
Roxy accepted the hug, but looked as perplexed as ever. From that forth, Aisha's baby Trent joined the household as our second pet. Naturally, I laid down some rules and conditions beforehand. First and most importantly, if it ever hurt someone, we'd get rid of it immediately. Second, Aisha needed to thoroughly train it not to attack anyone. Third, she had to explain to everyone exactly what kind of a plant it was. Fourth, she wasn't going to let it near any babies just to be on the safe side. And so on and so forth. I delivered these rules to Aisha in the form of a strict lecture, but she nodded in agreement to every one of them without so much as a scowl. The girl kept her promises, fortunately, so this would probably work out fine. Incidentally, I gave our little friend the name Bite, picking out a few letters from the words Baby Trent. Hopefully, he would develop into a trustworthy and helpful member of our family. I was already picturing him planted out in Aisha's fields, defending my precious rice crops from predators. How the hell had the girl found my secret altar, though? You really had to keep an eye on these maids. Legends of the University number 4. The boss has tamed monsters living in his house. Chapter 5, Paternal Dignity. Before I knew it, 3 more months had slipped past. It was summer now. The snow had melted completely, and we'd landed in the middle of a hot, dry stretch. So far, I'd spent most of this year mooning over Lucy. Whenever I had a little spare time, I'd use it looking at her. She was my first and only child, after all. It was only natural for me to adore her. On this day, like many other days, I was hanging around in her bedroom, watching her quietly. Whenever I gazed down on that angelic, chubby-cheeked little face, it put a big, goofy grin on mine. However, I was technically the head of this household now. I didn't exactly exude authority, but I did want to act in a relatively dignified fashion around my wives and sisters. If I spent too much time cooing over my baby like an idiot, their opinion of me would surely be affected. For this reason, I intended to be a stern father. You know, tough but fair, that sort of thing. If I knew Paul, he'd probably had similar thoughts looking down on me as a baby. A father should inspire awe in his children. He should be an example to them and a goal for them to reach. At one point, I thought of Paul as pitiful or even pathetic, but by now I knew better. He'd been a magnificent father. He had his flaws and plenty of them, but he was wonderful nonetheless. To be sure, he wasn't the most faithful husband out there, but I didn't have much right to criticize him on that point. It was better to focus on the positives. At this point, I could say with confidence that I wanted to follow in my father's Uh-oh, she's fussing again. I didn't have Sylphie to rely on today, so I had to step up to the plate myself. Here we go, Lucy. It's your daddy. A blah, blah, blah. Ha, ha, ha. Oh, Lord, she is so cute. Is there anything in the world as adorable as this baby's smile? My wife somehow gave birth to a literal angel by mistake. There's no other explanation for this. I got a little sidetracked there for a moment. Let's get back to the stern and dignified thing. The way I saw it, the ideal father was close enough to his children to be caring, but distant enough to guide them forward. Normally, he should be kind and gentle with his kids. When necessary, however, he shouldn't hesitate to give them a firm scolding. And when they really needed his support, he should always step up to the plate for them. That was the ideal father, as I saw it. It sort of sounded like I was just describing my impressions of Paul. Was he my idea of a perfect dad then? I didn't want my children thinking of me as pathetic, to be honest, but then again it was partially Paul's weaknesses that endeared me to him. There were lots of lessons I could learn from his example. Also, though he might have looked pitiful to me sometimes, he had always been a wonderful dad to Norn. That much was obvious, considered how much she'd adored him. In that case, maybe love and compassion was the most improved to me. In that case, maybe love and compassion was the most improved. In that case, maybe love. A, B, ba, ba, ba. Oh no, she's getting worked up again. Huo, Lucy, Daddy's back. I'm gonna pick you up, okay? Here we go. As soon as I picked Lucy up out of her cradle and began to rock her back and forth, she started cackling loudly. Judging from the cherubic smile on her face, she liked being cradled in my big, strong arms. My heart couldn't take much more of this cuteness.
Rudeus.
Yes, Suzanne? As I comforted Lucy, her wet nurse Suzanne had spoken up from across the room. Suzanne was a retired adventurer and an old friend of mine.
I don't mind soothing the little lady when she fusses, you know. It's part of the job.
Appreciate the offer, but I'd like to keep these blissful moments to myself, thank you very much. The two of us had gotten to know each other back when I was just starting off as a solo adventurer. We'd fallen out of contact for about 4 years, but then she'd seen my posting for the wet nurse job. It had been a real shock seeing her again.
Huh. Well, if you really want to do it yourself, feel free.
Is there any man in the world who doesn't want to soothe their newborn daughter?
Can't say my husband's too eager to deal with it.
How shameful. It sounds like he needs an education in the joys of fatherhood. I remembered the time I spent with Suzanne very clearly. I'd been only 12 years old, newly dumped by Eris, and making my way to the Northern Territories alone, feeling extremely sorry for myself. Words cannot describe how miserable it made me to have to dissolve our old party, dead end at the Guild in Bashrand. As a way of distracting myself from my feelings, I immediately tried to take on an extremely difficult and dangerous task all by myself. That was when Suzanne and her party had stepped in. Their group had 2 warriors, 1 archer, 1 healer, and 1 mage. They were a B-rank party, but all of them were experienced veterans. Suzanne was one of the frontline warriors. To be honest, she wasn't that impressive a swordswoman or anything. In terms of combat skill, she was closer to the bottom of rank B than the top. However, she had a reputation for kindness, and she knew how to keep a party running smoothly. When she noticed me trying to take a suicide mission, she walked right over and said something like, "How about we do that job together?" I protested that I was trying to make a name for myself as a solo adventurer, but she argued that I needed to work with people to build a reputation. In the end, I let her talk me into working together. At the time, Suzanne was alarmed by just how rough I looked. My eyes were dull and lifeless, and she could tell I wasn't sleeping much at all. When I spoke to her in a carefully polite tone, she'd found it creepy rather than reassuring. Nonetheless, she took me in and helped me out. Until the day I left that first city behind, her party took me along on all sorts of quests. They even invited me to join them on a permanent basis. I ended up rejecting that offer, but they were always friendly to me when we bumped into each other. Sometimes they'd even pull me into a tavern for a meal. Looking back on it now, it was obvious they were looking out for me in all sorts of ways. I was grateful to all of them. After we went our separate ways, Suzanne had married Timothy, the mage and leader of their party. They'd moved back here together, since Sharia happened to be Timothy's hometown. They had 2 kids together. Unfortunately, their third had been born prematurely and died soon after. Suzanne's body was still producing milk despite the death of her child. so she decided to sell her services as a wet nurse. She'd been looking through the job postings when she happened to see my name. Incidentally, I'd stopped by to say hello to Timothy just a few days earlier. The man hadn't changed a bit.
Gotta say, though, you sure have changed.
Have I?
Yeah. Back in the old days, you never would have insulted a woman's husband in front of her.
This was true. When I first met Suzanne, I was terrified of upsetting people. I still didn't want to offend anyone if I could possibly avoid it, but I guess I wasn't walking on eggshells these days. A lot of things had happened since then. Sorry, Suzanne. Did I upset you?
Nah. A little teasing never hurt anyone, you know? As long as you're saying it to my face, it's all good. Makes me more comfortable, if anything.
It probably had something to do with the friends I'd made at the university. I had more people I could talk to casually these days. Zenoba and Cliff both preferred it that way, and it was easier for me as well.
Hell, you could stand to be a little more casual around me in general. You're technically my employer, you know?
I suppose so, but that's no reason to treat you impolitely. Suzanne rolled her eyes at that.
Whatever you say, kid.
I owed Suzanne a lot. At the end of the day, she was the one who'd taught me the ropes of adventuring in the Northern Territories. I couldn't bring myself to be too casual with her.
Well, I guess it's all good with me, as long as I get my paycheck.
Of course, I'll tip handsomely, I assure you. The woman talked like it was all about the money, but she'd been wonderful so far. I'd been a little nervous at first since I remembered some horror stories about sadistic babysitters from my previous life, but Suzanne was so tender with Lucy that you'd never have known she wasn't her mother. Mushoku Tensei Volume 13 by Refuge in the Megona Cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audio drama like this, please visit artale.ai and use promotion code ARTALE to activate your account. Now, enjoy the story. Of course, we did have Lilia and Aisha hanging around the house to keep an eye on things, and I knew from the start she wasn't the kind of person who'd mistreat a child. How are your sons doing, by the way?
Ah, the boys are a real handful, as always. They're running Grandma and Grandpa ragged.
Suzanne and Timothy were living with Timothy's parents at the moment. It was the only reason she was able to work full-time as a wet nurse with 2 toddlers running around the house. She regularly complained to Lilia about how tough it was to be living under the same roof as her mother-in-law. Lilia was probably more inclined to identify with the mother-in-law, but I guess she was about Suzanne's age. It seemed like they got along. I saw them drinking tea together every once in a while.
I've been wondering, did you want a boy first, too?
Not really. Why would I?
Well, you know, everybody wants an heir, right?
Ah, sure. I'd had a few discussions like this after my daughter was born. Zenoba and Ariel had both brought it up as well. It was obviously an important issue to royal families and noble houses back in Asura. I'd even heard stories of newborn boys being whisked away from distant relatives for adoption by the main Boreas family. The thing is, though, I'm not really a noble or a wealthy businessman. It doesn't really bother me either way. I just want to see my kid grow up happy. If anything, I was pleased to have received the cuter option. I was seriously outnumbered in this house, true. But I can't say I minded being surrounded by adorable girls and charming women. It wasn't like they were bullying me either. They were almost too nice.
Hey, that's the spirit. Wish my husband would take a page out of your book. The moment I got pregnant, he was talking about all the stuff he wanted to do if it turned out to be a boy. Didn't spare a minute's thought for the alternative.
Well, you got your boys in the end, so I guess it turned out all right.
Yeah, I guess. I've got some mixed feelings about it, though. The third one was a girl, you know?
Ah, right. Sorry. That was a dumb thing to say. For an instant, I found myself wondering how I would have felt if Lucy had been stillborn. Just the thought of it was horrible enough.
It's fine. We'll just try again.
Suzanne seemed almost nonchalant about it, though. Was losing a baby really something you could shrug off like that? At the very least, I knew I would have taken it hard. It wasn't easy for Sylphie to get pregnant, so there was no telling how long it would take for us to get another shot. And more importantly, Sylphie would have been devastated. It was easy to picture her crying her eyes out and apologizing to me for losing our child. Gah! Just thinking about this was making my stomach hurt. There wasn't any point in dwelling on it, right? Lucy had come out fine, and Sylphie was okay too. Enough time had passed that I felt relatively confident it wasn't just a dream. Rather than thinking about how things could have gone wrong, I should be enjoying my good fortune. So anyway, I'm assuming you guys dissolved your party at some point, right?
Yeah, not long after you left town. When you're as mediocre as we were, it gets pretty tough when you lose a core party member, you know? Patrice said he was going back to Asura to become a soldier, and we sort of fell apart on the spot.
Do you know what happened to Sarah?
You curious?
Yeah, a little. Sarah was the name of an archer who belonged to Suzanne's party. It was rare for an adventurer to rely on a bow and arrows, but she had a real talent for landing timely, accurate shots in battle, which made her quite effective at her role. We were relatively close in age, and she'd been openly hostile to me at first. But over time, we'd gotten increasingly friendly. In the end, our budding relationship imploded thanks to my performance issues, but I was still a bit interested in how she was doing now.
Well, she's still out there making a living as an adventurer. You don't see many archers around, since it's a lot easier to learn how to fling a fireball, but she's got the skills and experience now. She'll be just fine anywhere she goes.
Ah, okay.
If there's anything you left unsaid, you should probably go find her sooner rather than later. Never know when an adventurer might get themselves killed.
I don't think that's really necessary. Our little fling was in the past now. Finding her to talk about it wasn't going to do me any good. It was hard to imagine that Sarah would enjoy remembering that whole mess either.
Well, if you say so.
Suddenly, Suzanne's eyes flicked away from me and toward the door. When I turned around, I saw Zenith standing there quietly. Lilia was lurking just behind her. Mom? Zenith made no reply, of course, but Lilia nodded.
Pardon the intrusion, Master Rudeus.
Her eyes a bit unfocused, Zenith slowly stepped forward, then sat down next to me, positioning herself so she could get a good look at Lucy's face. Don't worry, Mom. Lucy's doing just fine today. This got no reaction whatsoever. Zenith just stared at the baby so intently she seemed to have forgotten anyone else was even in the room. After her arrival at my house, I felt like she'd become noticeably more active. When Norn was around, she tried to feed her at the dinner table. When she spotted Aisha, they'd go out to the garden and pull weeds together. And when I was watching Lucy, she'd stop by like this to check in on us. There were subtle differences in how she reacted to Roxy and Sylphie, too. Her facial expression never seemed to change, and she still hadn't spoken a word. But she was moving. She was changing. Maybe she was inching her way back to something like a recovery. Zenith had reached out her hands, smiling from ear to ear. Lucy grabbed at them playfully.
Ah, little Lucy sure does love her grandma, doesn't she?
At first, I'd been nervous about this. Zenith's symptoms were comparable to something like dementia. I'd worried she might harm Lucy for no reason at all, without even meaning to. By this point, though, it was obvious that we had nothing to worry about. All she ever did was watch Lucy quietly. I'd never gotten a hint of a negative emotion from her. If anything, she seemed like a normal woman gazing peacefully down at her grandchild. I felt a bit guilty for having doubted her in the first place. It wasn't like she'd ever gotten violent with anyone before. On some level, it seemed like Lucy understood that she meant well, too. The kid was all smiles whenever Zenith visited. It was honestly pretty heartwarming. But of course, there was a lot we didn't know about Zenith's condition and how it might develop. It was hard to imagine anything bad coming of these visits, but given how much was still uncertain, it was probably best for them to stay supervised. After all, accidents can happen even when your intentions are good. Suddenly, Zenith looked up at me. It almost looked like she was trying to send me a message with her eyes. Not that I had any idea what it might mean. Seconds later, Lucy started fussing loudly.
Pardon me, Miss Zenith.
Lilia reached down and gently took Lucy away from me and Zenith. Suzanne came over and received the baby. She started soothing her while simultaneously checking her diaper and looking for rashes. After a moment, though, she nodded.
Looks like somebody's hungry.
Was it that time already? Sylphie had breastfed her before leaving, but somehow a couple hours must have slipped by since then. Well then, I guess I'll step out of the room.
I don't mind if you want to watch, you know.
It was kind of Suzanne to offer, but I declined politely. We were old friends and all, but that didn't make it okay for me to see the breasts of a married woman. She was just as well endowed as Zenith or Lilia, too. They actually seemed a little bigger than before. Maybe it was all the milk in there. If I got a glimpse of those things, the wise old hermit inside me might be roused from his slumber. That in itself might not be such a big deal. But what if Lilia, say, were to mention it to the others? Sylphie and Roxy might be disheartened. It was an undeniable fact that they were more on the flat-chested side of the spectrum, but I didn't choose women based on their bodies. I didn't want them feeling self-conscious about it. In any case, was it just me? Or had Zenith noticed that Lucy was ready to be fed? Maybe you pick up a sixth sense for that kind of thing after raising 3 children of your own. I walked out into the hallway and glanced through the nearest window. Unfortunately, it was a gray and rainy day. It was hard to guess exactly what the time might be, but since Lucy had gotten hungry, it was probably close to noon. Somehow I'd managed to spend my entire morning hanging out with the baby, but it was time well spent in my opinion. Nothing was more important than spending time with your kid. For the moment, though, I headed to my study, a small room on the first floor that I'd reserved for my research. The desk inside was covered in handwritten reports and a few magic stones. I hadn't spent the last 6 months playing with my daughter and my sisters to the exclusion of anything else. I'd also been studying the prizes I'd brought back from the Bigaret continent. It was these stones that had lent the Hydra its ability to shrug off my spells, forcing us into dangerous close-range combat. They absorbed any magic that came in contact with them. At a glance, they looked like ordinary light green scales. If not for their transparency, they wouldn't even have been identifiable as stones. I'd managed to learn a few basic facts about these from the library at the University of Magic. First of all, they were usually referred to as stones of absorption. Menatite hydras produced them naturally within their bodies. Since that species of monster had gone extinct thousands of years ago during the continental sundering, they were now incredibly rare and valuable. Many dragons produced magical stones or crystals inside their bodies. This was just one particularly unusual case in point. The stone in my staff, for example, had been retrieved from a draconic species of sea serpent. The effects of these stones varied widely, but many of them had direct magical applications of some sort. Some could increase your magical capacity, or reduce the amount of mana it took to cast spells. Others made your spells twice as powerful without increasing their mana cost. It wasn't that surprising that there was one capable of absorbing magic entirely. The tricky part was figuring out how exactly these stones were doing that. When you just left them sitting on a desk like this, the stones of absorption didn't actively suck the mana out of everything around them. Clearly, something had to happen first. After a bit of experimentation, I soon realized that the stones had a front and a back. It was very hard to tell one side from the other, but they definitely existed. When I placed my hand on the back of a stone and fed it some mana, the front side would begin absorbing magic while emitting a high-pitched whine. In other words, these things didn't work automatically. You had to turn them on and off yourself. It was a little bit like the suction pads on the tentacles of an octopus. It seemed that the Hydra we fought had been activating its magic-absorbing armor as it saw the spells fly, rendering my attacks useless at the last second. I had a hard time imagining many people could react as quickly, but wild animals can often have much better dynamic vision and reflexes than any human being. Experimenting further, I also realized that the stone didn't exactly absorb magic in the way I'd been expecting. When I held it in my right hand and cast a spell at it with the other, the spell would disappear, but I didn't regain the mana that I'd spent. In fact, I was pretty sure it was costing me some mana the same amount I'd used to cast the original spell. It would take more focused experiments to be sure what this meant, but I did have a working hypothesis. Basically, I suspected that the stone was converting the mana I fed it into waves that could instantly disintegrate anything else made of mana. The results were similar to the spell Disturb Magic, but I felt like these stones were even more thorough at obliterating the spells they interacted with. There were still many things this theory alone couldn't explain, of course. For example, figurines I'd created with magic were completely unaffected by the stones, even at point-blank range. Earthen figurines were immune to the waves, but the projectile from my stone cannon wasn't. I had no idea why that would be the case. Maybe the mana in the figurines had stabilized over time, making them immune to disruption. There wasn't much point going down these rabbit holes, though. I didn't even have a good grasp of what mana really was. Rather than groping around for a comprehensive explanation, I wanted to focus on how I could use these things, and how I could counteract them in the future. With that thought in mind, I carried out another experiment. I had the feeling that I could use these stones to destroy some things Disturb Magic couldn't. Magic circles, for example. Cliff had helped me out with this experiment. As I'd hoped, I managed to destroy both a barrier spell and the magic circle he'd used to cast it. The design on his original scroll was unaffected, but as long as the spell was in active use, the stones of absorption could erase the circle itself. However, they weren't able to affect a magic circle on the inside of a magical implement. Maybe it was because that circle was carved into the implement itself, rather than drawn on its surface. That would make sense. Thinking back on our battle with the Hydra, I realized that it never deactivated the magic circle in its lair despite thrashing around all over the place. In any case, the most important takeaway was that these scales couldn't destroy everything of a magical nature. That said, they were probably more than effective enough to deal with most threats I might encounter. With one of these in my back pocket, I could break myself out the next time I blundered into a trap and landed on the inside of a barrier spell. Ideally, I would avoid blundering into traps in the first place, but it never hurt to have an insurance policy. At the moment, I was thinking about incorporating one of the stones into my prosthetic hand somewhere, maybe in the palm. It might be tricky to use that hand for both activating the stone and casting magic, but hopefully I'd get the hang of it with some practice.
Hello, brother dear. You have a guest.
I'd been tinkering around in my study for some time when Aisha popped her head in to announce that we had visitors. Her face was calm and composed. She'd snapped into professional maid mode. Who is it?
Prince Zenoba. He's waiting for you in the living room.
Wonder if he needs something? Not that I'd mind if he just came over on a whim, of course. Maybe he just wanted some company. Got it. Thanks, Aisha. I pushed myself up off my seat casually. Zenoba had been making progress on his own research into the automaton recently. My Zalif prosthesis had been a product of those efforts, and as it turned out, the automaton's legs and feet worked similarly to the hands and arms. I'd helped make the prototype this time. Zenoba drew up the plans. I created the model section by section with my magic, and Cliff inscribed it with the necessary magic circles. It was a slow, delicate process. We'd spent nearly a month making a single leg. Someday we'd hopefully be selling them alongside our artificial hands, but we were a long way from mass-producing these things. Anyway, now that we'd gotten a good grasp of the limbs, Zenoba was finally starting to investigate the automaton's body. This involved locating the fine seams between its sections and then carefully cutting them apart to study the innards. Right at the center of its chest, he'd found a magic stone. It was a pretty red crystalline thing of unusual size. After studying it, however, he realized that it wasn't actually just a single stone, it was a combination of numerous smaller ones. This was clearly the automaton's core. If we managed to decipher all the patterns etched onto it, we would theoretically be capable of making the same thing ourselves. And then, once we took our research to even greater heights, the robo-made dream would finally become a reality. Unfortunately, Zenoba was struggling in the face of this new challenge. The circles on the core were unbelievably strange and complex. What's more, the patterns were full of snatches of ancient writing notes, warnings, passages from obscure books, and preliminary scratched-out designs. Basically, it was clear that the creator of the automaton had still been perfecting the design for the core even as they built it. It seemed that the masterpiece we'd found was, in fact, a failure, or prototype. There was no telling what its creator had actually been going for. Making sense of all this was going to be much harder than any challenge we'd faced so far, but Zenoba was undaunted. He seemed, if anything, even more determined than before to carry out his life's mission. For whatever it was worth, he had my moral support. "Hey, Zenoba. Sorry to keep you waiting." When I walked into the living room, Zenoba jumped up from the sofa where he'd been sipping tea a moment earlier.
Ah, Master Rudeus, my apologies for intruding on you like this.
Julie and Ginger, who were standing in the corner of the room, followed his example and lowered their heads silently. "So, what can I do for you today?"
I was simply in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd drop by and say hello.
"Huh, so it really was just a social call." "Got it. Well, make yourself at home." This was unusual behavior for Zenoba, but I wasn't going to turn him away or anything. As I settled down onto a chair, Julie trotted over to my side.
Look, Grandmaster Rudeus, I finished another one.
She held out a figurine for my examination. It was her latest attempt at a Rudeus figure that I had her reproducing as an assignment. "Nice work. You're improving quickly. Keep churning them out for me, all right?"
Okay.
While I was off journeying across the Begarid continent, Julie had finished her original Rudeus figurine. I'd been genuinely surprised by how good it looked. It was clear she'd used my own version as a model, but in all honesty, hers was just better. For one thing, the stance was perfect. Even a total amateur was going to realize they were looking at a total badass. When I showed it to Norn, she couldn't help murmuring, "I want one," under her breath, so I gave the original to her as a present. She had it on a shelf in her dorm room at the moment. Recognizing Julie's success for what it was, I tasked her with producing as many copies of the figurine as she could. It still took her quite a while to make a single one, but that wasn't really a big deal. The job was a good way to work on stretching her mana capacity, and hopefully we'd have a nice pile of them ready to go by the time we were ready to sell Norn's book.
Yesterday I saw Miss Norn at school.
"Oh yeah? You bumped into each other? Did she say anything?"
She thanked me, so I thanked her too.
"Ah."
That's nice. Good for you, Julie.
I reached out and patted Julie on the head affectionately. She stiffened up a little at my touch, but didn't flinch away. As it happened, Norn had recently finished her book about Rudeus. Even after she started learning the sword from me, she'd kept up with her writing. The book was short, and the prose was a bit clumsy and awkward. It only covered one part of Rudeus' life too, the story of those cursed spears, beginning with Rudeus' loyal service to his lord and ending with his revenge. But despite all its flaws, she'd managed to capture Rudeus' personality perfectly. His pride, his grief, and his boldness came across with startling clarity. With a bit of careful editing, I was confident we could sell it as a children's book. In order to test that theory, I'd read the draft to Julie, who absolutely loved it. She'd made me read it 3 times in a row and probably would have kept going if Ginger hadn't intervened. From the sound of things, nobody had ever read Julie stories like that when she was little. Perhaps it was a cultural thing. The dwarves apparently had traditional fairy tales of some kind, but maybe they didn't write books for children. Or maybe her parents were just too busy to spend much time entertaining her. Not that it really mattered either way. Anyway, since Julie had enjoyed the book so much, I'd been planning to introduce her to Norn one of these days, but it seemed they'd beat me to the punch. Norn had probably been a little embarrassed to learn she had a fan already. It was nice to hear they'd gotten off on the right foot, though. Recognizing each other's talents is a good first step toward building a good working relationship. All of this meant we were making excellent progress on the preparations for our superb PR campaign. I was keeping up with my research and my training, too. Overall, I felt good about how I was using my time. If I pushed myself to take on anything more than I was already handling, I'd probably be overloading myself. Maybe it would have been optimal to focus on a single specific area in which to specialize, but my feeling was that I'd never be the best at anything I tried. That was true in my first try at life, and it was probably true in this one too. There's always going to be someone better than you out there. Maybe I was the best mage at the university right now, but the world was full of unbelievably powerful people. There's such a thing as genuine talent, the kind of talent you can't compete with, no matter how hard you try. I didn't feel any need to push myself to be the very best at any one thing, though. My goal was to be flexible enough to compete on multiple fronts. If I couldn't beat someone in a one-on-one fight, I'd just find a way to slip around them. It sounded good in theory, but of course, sometimes you might find yourself staring down a Menatite Hydra. I wanted to become powerful enough to defend my family, if nothing else. Fighting wasn't really my specialty, but I'd have to find ways to get stronger. Oh, right. You want to take a look at Lucy Zenoba?
Ooh, you're willing to show me your daughter? Are you sure?
I mean, yeah. Is there some reason why I wouldn't?
I suppose not. However, I believe there are certain countries where it's traditional to wait until a child turns 5 before letting anyone outside the family see them.
Really? Huh. I'd rather show her off to everyone I can, personally. In any case, there was no reason to think too hard about all this right now. I just had to keep moving slowly, steadily forward. I was keeping up with my daily training and magic exercises, chipping away at my research projects and making lots of interesting friends. Compared to my last try at life, I'd been putting in a lot more effort and getting a lot more out of every day. It was fair to say I was doing a good job so far by my standards, at least. In other words, there was no need to rush things. If I pushed myself too hard, I'd eventually break down physically or mentally. My haste might make me careless, too. I didn't want to blunder into another disaster like I had with that Hydra. So for now, I was going to keep moving at my own pace, one step at a time. I wanted to make my efforts at self-improvement a part of my daily routine. Hopefully, that effort would pay off the next time I found myself facing a real challenge. What was the next step I should take at this point, though? I'd replaced my hand with a prosthetic. My research was coming along nicely. My relationships with my wives were excellent. My sisters and daughter were doing well, and our family had a solid financial safety net. Maybe it was about time I had Roxy teach me some king-tier water magic. Legends of the University number 5. The boss has a soft spot for little kids. Chapter 6. A Water King is Born. In a normally quiet corner of the University of Magic, a suggestive conversation was taking place.
No, I said no.
The place, a small building known to certain students as the PE storage shed. In front of its door, a young man had seized a blue-haired girl by the arm. Come on, what's the big deal? I'm begging you here. Teach.
No! Means no!
The girl's attitude was one of curt rejection. Her face was turned to one side, and she was pouting in displeasure. But the young man wasn't backing down. Just this one time, please?
I've already given you my answer. Let go of me, please. Lunch is ending soon.
Hey, don't be like that. It was clear he had no intention of releasing her. The girl looked around the area, her expression troubled. This was a quiet corner of the campus, but that didn't mean it was deserted. There were several people in the area. But when the girl shot them pleading glances, everyone simply looked away. There was a simple reason for this. They were afraid of the young man harassing her. He was the most infamous delinquent in this entire city. It wasn't that they didn't want to help the girl, but they all knew that any attempt at intervention would likely be pointless and might well cost them dearly. None were brave enough to risk it. Think it over for a minute, okay? This is a win-win arrangement we're talking about. You might not like the idea right now, but in the long run, we're both going to benefit.
Well, I suppose, yes.
Hey, how about this? If you do this for me, I'll do anything you want in return.
Look, I just...
As the girl's resolve faltered, the young man pressed his advantage ruthlessly. He moved in closer, nearly pressing his mouth to her ear as he whispered honeyed words. The girl's face was growing redder by the moment. Fiddling with her long, braided hair, she looked down at the ground in embarrassment.
Hey, it's the student council.
But at that very moment, the most handsome man in the university arrived on the scene. A conspicuous white-haired girl in sunglasses followed close behind him. The relieved onlookers recognized these new arrivals immediately. They were Luke and Fitz of the student council. Ignoring the shrill cries of their audience, the two of them strode up to the young man and the girl.
Well, Rudeus, we're here because someone reported you were assaulting a female student, but...
Luke trailed off mid-sentence to heave a heavy sigh. He knew both of the participants in this little farce. Rudeus Greyrat and his second wife Roxy. The girl wasn't a student, in other words, and Rudeus hadn't been assaulting her. Having confirmed these facts, Luke turned around and started walking back the way he'd came.
Fitz, you deal with this, please.
Scratching at her ears awkwardly, Fitz nodded.
Right.
As the young knight left the scene, Roxy let out a long sigh of her own.
A female student? Really?
You can't blame them, teacher. Most of the students aren't aware that you're a professor yet. At this point, he looked over at Silent Fitz for support and found her looking displeased, puffing her cheeks out slightly. What's the matter, Sylphie?
Look, Rudy, I know Roxy is your wife, but that doesn't mean you can force her to do something she doesn't want to. Sometimes a girl just isn't in the mood, you know?
Right. Absolutely.
Honestly, maybe she's better at this stuff, but you could try asking me instead.
Wait, hold on. Could this be... Suddenly, Rudeus's eyes lit up. Stepping quickly over to Fitz, he poked at her cheek with his finger. She responded by turning her head the other way and puffing out her cheeks even further. It is! It is! You're jealous, Sylphie! With this exclamation, he threw his arms around Fitz and squeezed her tightly. Fitz didn't seem entirely displeased, but she didn't stop scowling either.
I wouldn't say I'm jealous, really. More like disappointed.
Don't worry, honey. I won't leave you out. We'll do this together.
What, are you serious? You mean all three of us?
Rudeus brought his mouth to Fitz's ear and murmured his reply. Yeah, that's right. We can have Roxy teach both of us at once.
Roxy's going to teach us?
Well, of course she is. She's the expert after all. Fitz glanced over at Roxy, who turned her face to the side sulkily.
I still didn't say I'm willing yet, you know.
Come on, don't say that. Sylphie wants to learn, too. Isn't that right, Sylphie?
I don't know. It sounds kind of embarrassing.
Still wrapped up in Rudeus's arms, Fitz squirmed around uncertainly. The sunglasses she'd once worn as a disguise hid her eyes from view, but it was obvious they were shining with emotion.
But I guess I'll do it for you, Rudy.
Oh, Sylphie! Overcome with affection, Rudeus buried his face in Fitz's hair. Its pleasant scent and softness left him even more excited, and his hug grew more intense by the second. Fitz, for her part, was entranced by this powerful embrace and soon stopped resisting it entirely. Roxy looked on with envy in her eyes. This was exactly what Rudeus needed. It was time to press the attack once more. Why don't you want to teach me, Roxy? Don't you like me any more? This time, he took a deeply wounded tone. It was enough to make Roxy flinch.
Of course I still like you, Rudy. I love you very much.
Then why are you being like this?
Well, if I teach you this, I won't have anything left that I'm better at than you.
What? Don't be ridiculous, Roxy. You're on a higher plane of existence than me. Roxy sighed at this.
Okay, look, I've been meaning to say this for a while, but I think your opinion of me is a little overblown. I'm a petty person, really, the sort of woman who gets upset about her students surpassing her.
That's not a problem, I assure you. You're perfect just the way you are, pettiness and all.
Anyway, I spent months of my life learning this, you know? You and Sylphie are more talented than I ever was, so you'll probably master it much more quickly.
At this point, Fitz finally realized that she'd misunderstood the situation, and her dreamy smile gave way to a confused expression.
Sorry. Rudy? What exactly are we talking about here?
Oh, right. I was asking Roxy to teach me a king-tier water spell. Are you familiar with the concept of a romantic bike ride? Allow me to elaborate. I'm referring specifically to a youthful couple sharing a single bicycle. Most typically, A boy will be pedaling up in front, with a girl seated behind him. She sits sideways on the luggage rack, perhaps with her arms wrapped tightly around his waist, perhaps keeping a slight distance instead. The boy might be doing the steering and pedaling, but in many cases, the bike itself belongs to the girl. The natural habitat for an event of this kind is a riverbank in the early evening. The warm red glow of the setting sun conveniently disguises any mild blushing that might be going on. At the moment, I found myself in a very comparable situation. The sun was still high in the sky, but the nape of Sylphie's neck was sitting right in front of me. By moving my nose forward, I could easily fill my nostrils with the sweet scent of her skin. I also had my arms around her waist, with my hands crossed right around her navel. My upper body was pressed closely against hers. I could feel the beating of her heart through my chest. It was truly splendid. Just as a side note, I should mention that I was keeping my lower body a bit separated from hers for reasons that don't need to be stated. She was my wife and all, but I still needed to treat her with respect. Also, I'd seen several news stories about car crashes caused by a passenger groping their driver. We were on a horse at the moment, which wasn't quite the same thing, but it still wasn't a good idea to distract the person holding the reins.
Matsukaze really is a good horse. He's calm and does what he's told, but he's also very strong.
I leaned to look over Sylphie's shoulder, and the back of a blue-haired girl came into view. It was Roxy. She was sitting just in front of Sylphie.
Yep, you don't see a horse like this every day, that's for sure.
The three of us had squeezed onto the back of a single horse. Matsukaze, the most neglected of our household's pets, didn't seem to mind this excessive burden one bit. He was trotting along as if we weren't even there.
Didn't Ginger pick her out for you, Rudy? She's got a good eye for horses.
Do you know a lot about horses yourself, Sylphie?
Huh? I wouldn't go that far, but I did get to see some of the best horses in the Kingdom of Asura a couple times, like the one the captain of the Royal Knights rides.
I see. I'm sure that must be a splendid animal.
At this, Matsukaze whinnied, as if to object.
Oh, I'm sorry, Matsukaze. You're quite splendid, too. After all, you're the one and only steed of the Grey Rat family.
Did certain animals understand human languages in this world? Or maybe Roxy was just a horse whisperer. Probably not. Pets start responding to your voice when you talk to them enough. That's all. Aisha was always chattering at Bite and Dillo, too.
In any case, I have to admit, it's a bit embarrassing riding in front at my age.
Every time we met someone coming the opposite direction, Roxy would blush and pull her hat down over her face. I suppose sitting in front of the person holding the reins was comparable to riding in the baby seat in a car.
I wouldn't have minded following you two on Dillo or something, you know.
Nice try, Roxy. I bet you were planning to run off the instant we took our eyes off you.
I'm not a child. I wasn't going to run away.
Enjoying the sound of my wives chatting, I took some time to gaze at the scenery around us. At the moment, we were on the outskirts of the city. There was a small, beautiful stream running to our right. On our left, there was a large plain with a forest in the distance. The Northern Territories weren't the most fertile part of the world, but at this time of the year, there was lots of green. Up until a few minutes ago, we'd been passing fields of wheat and potatoes, but now we were surrounded by empty, undeveloped country. I wasn't entirely sure how many hours we'd been riding now, but we'd clearly come far enough to get some privacy. Watching the water on our right, I caught glimpses of fish as the sunlight reflected off their scales. This was one of several smaller streams that fed into the river which ran past the city of Sharia. It might be nice to come out of the city to fish on a sunny day, even if I didn't travel this far. Not that I'd ever fished before.
I told you too I was going to teach you, and I intend to do a proper job of it.
The reason we'd come all the way out here was simple enough. Roxy had folded. My repeated pleas and badgering had finally worn her down.
I'll teach you the only king-tier water spell I've mastered, Lightning Storm.
Roxy still sounded disappointed about this turn of events, so I reached past Sylphie's side and stroked her shoulders affectionately. In any case, Lightning Storm, huh? Just based on the name, it sounded like a standard electricity-based spell. Now that I thought about it, though, lightning wasn't one of the standard magical disciplines in this world. I'd never even seen anyone use an electric-type spell before. And on top of that, this was a king tier spell. I had to assume it was going to be dramatic.
All right. I think we've come far enough.
After a bit more time on the road, Roxy called us to a halt and hopped down off Matsukaze. She proceeded to tie him to a small tree about as thick as her leg. Hey, teacher, do you remember Caravaggio?
Oh, yes. That was the name of Paul's horse, wasn't it? That really brings me back.
It had been 12 years since she helped me become a water saint. I'd picked up a bunch of other skills in the meantime, but only now was I finally moving up to king tier. It felt like I'd taken a lot of detours on the road to this moment. But on the topic of the horse, poor Caravaggio had very nearly died back then. Roxy had just managed to save his life, but he could have been killed instantly. It was possible she'd forgotten about that after all this time, so I felt the need to bring it up. Is there any risk of another accident, like the one we had back then?
I don't think so, no. But we wouldn't want Matsukaze catching cold in the rain, so you should make an earth fortress to shelter him.
Got it. I promptly turned and enclosed our horse in an earthen igloo of sorts. He accepted this with admirable aplomb.
Should I be waiting at a distance or anything?
Said Sylphie, pulling on her rain jacket.
No, that won't be necessary.
Replied Roxy, doing the same. Even a saint tier spell was enough to leave you drenched, so I'd proposed that we bring these along as a precautionary measure. I pulled mine on as well.
Is everyone ready?
Yep.
Whenever you are.
Roxy nodded and pointed at a tree far off in the distance. It was an enormous thing, even from far away. I could tell that its trunk was incredibly thick.
I'll be using that tree as my target. I can only use this once today, so watch very carefully.
Got it. With another small nod at my reply, Roxy closed her eyes and began breathing deeply. Her hands clutched her staff tightly as she focused intently on the task at hand. This went on for longer than I'd expected. She could fire off a Saint Tier spell quickly, but apparently this wasn't so easy for her. Although I didn't have an eye of magical power or anything, I felt pretty confident that she was using this time to gather up a huge amount of mana for the spell. After a few long minutes, Roxy's eyes snapped open, and she murmured, "All right then, let's begin." With those words, she stabbed her staff down into the ground. With her left hand, she held it steady. With her right, she clutched the magic stone on top of it. And finally, she began to chant slowly and carefully, as if reviewing every word before she spoke it.
Oh, spirits of the magnificent waters, I beseech the Prince of Thunder, grant me my wish, bless me with thy savagery, and reveal to this insignificant servant a glimpse of thy power. Let fear strike the heart of man as thy divine hammer strikes its anvil, and cover the land with water.
A few sentences in, I recognized the words and blinked in confusion.
Come, O rain, and wash everything away in thy flood of destruction.
Black clouds rapidly filled the sky above us. Simultaneously, a harsh and pelting rain began to fall. Wind whipped across the plain, driving the water up and under my coat. My robe was soaked instantly. Lightning flickered up above us, threatening to strike the ground at any moment. It was all very impressive, but I'd seen it before. This was just the Saint Tier spell Cumulonimbus.
I call upon you, mighty spirit of light, shining lord of the heavens.
But when I expected the chant to end, Roxy kept right on going.
Do you see the impudent foe towering before us? Do you see your sworn enemy in all his arrogance? I would be the holy blade that strikes him down. Let your radiant power teach him that the Emperor yet reigns supreme.
With every word that left her mouth, the sky above us was compressed. The black clouds that had stretched across the horizon collapsed in on themselves, forming a circle that drew smaller and denser by the second. Crackling electricity arced all around the dark mass, and finally, when the ring of cloud had shrunk to a mere dot in the sky,
Lightning?
a pillar of pure light fell to the earth. It was a bolt of lightning, yes, but it was nothing like any I had seen before. The sound wave reached us a split second later. The roar was deafening, even at this range. Sylphie clapped her hands over her ears and grimaced. I, on the other hand, was too busy staring slack-jawed out into the distance. I couldn't find anything to say, not a single word. After a few moments, I managed to swallow. At some point, I'd clutched my hands into fists. Once the roar had swept past us, nothing remained. The massive jet-black clouds were gone. The sheets of torrential rain were gone. The blinding pillar of lighting was gone. And that massive tree was gone too. There was simply nothing left. The sky above us was clear and blue. The earth around us was wet, but that was the only hint remaining of what had just transpired. When I strained my eyes, I could just barely make out a black clump of carbonized wood where the tree had once stood. Releasing her grip on her staff, Roxy staggered to one side. I hurried to catch her before she could fall. "Are you all right?"
Oh, I'm glad I pulled that off. With my mana capacity, I can only use it once, even with my staff. Did you get a good look at the spell, Rudy?
Absolutely, teacher. I hadn't been able to tear my eyes away from that for a single second. I remembered every word of the incantation, too.
Do you think you're ready to try it?
I'll give it a shot. After handing Roxy off to Sylphie, I turned away, held out my own staff, and tightened my grip on its shaft. Aquaharde had been with me since the day I turned 10, supporting me through all the turbulence of my life. I felt confident I could cast this spell without its help, but I wanted to use it anyway. Trying to remember what I'd just seen as precisely as possible, I looked up at the sky and began to chant. "O spirits of the magnificent waters, I beseech the Prince of Thunder. Grant me my wish, bless me with thy savagery, and reveal to this insignificant servant a glimpse of thy power. Let fear strike the heart of man as thy divine hammer strikes its anvil and cover the land with water. Come, O rain, and wash everything away in thy flood of destruction." A huge amount of mana poured from my hands into the staff, then shot up to the heavens. As the storm clouds gathered, I felt the magic raging all around me, ready to be harnessed and unleashed. If I had chanted the word cumulonimbus next, the spell would have completed itself. I wasn't going to do that, though, and I thought I understood why. If I gave the spell a coherent form, it would probably be impossible to achieve that compression of the clouds. I needed to move on to the next stage without stabilizing the spell. "I call upon you, mighty spirit of light, shining lord of the heavens. Do you see the impudent foe towering before us? Do you see your sworn enemy in all his arrogance? I would be the holy blade that strikes him down. Let your radiant power teach him that the Emperor yet reigns supreme." With every phrase I spoke, the magic in the air raged more and more intensely. I had no choice but to pour more mana into the spell to keep it from spinning out of control entirely. I was forcing the clouds to compress, squeezing them together with all my might. This spell demanded power. Raw brute power. That was the only thing that made it possible. I'd never cast anything that demanded such ferocious force before. No, that wasn't entirely true. Something about this was familiar to me. It wasn't so different from what I felt when I was pushing my stone cannon to the very limit of its potential. The moment I realized that, the spell suddenly felt much easier to control. Lightning. When I spoke the final word, I could sense something like an empty hole open up underneath my compressed ball of mana. I pushed everything down through it, all at once. Once again, a great pillar of lightning hit the earth, and its roar swept past us. I hadn't used any particular target, but the spell had struck the ground exactly where I wanted it to. Once again, there was nothing left in its wake. There were no black clouds above us, only clear blue sky. But the ground was a bit more sodden than before, and our coats were dripping with water. The afterimage of the lightning was still flashing before my eyes. My ears were still ringing from its roar. I'd pulled it off. Sylvie was the first to speak. All she managed, though, was a startled,
Oh, wow.
just like that. I was a king-tier water mage.
That was a little frustrating.
On our way back home, Sylphie's expression was slightly downcast. After my successful attempt, she'd given the spell a shot as well. Roxy started her off with cumulonimbus. She failed the first time, but pulled it off on her second try. Unfortunately, she hadn't managed to cast lightning. Her first attempt had failed, and it had also drained her dry. Compressing the mana was the hardest part of the spell by far. I'd probably only succeeded because I had experience doing something similar. Still, Sylphie was a quick learner. I had a feeling she'd figure it out if she gave it a couple more tries.
Don't feel bad, Sylphie. I still mess it up once every 5 times or so.
In a way, I was a little glad Sylphie had failed this time. If both of us had pulled it off on our first try, Roxy might have taken a hit to her pride. This was interesting, though. Based on what I saw today, Sylphie seemed to have a larger mana capacity than Roxy did, and Roxy's wasn't small at all, from what I understood.
Well, somebody succeeded on their very first try. You're incredible, Rudy.
Yes, that was certainly impressive. I have to admit I was expecting it to happen, but it was a bit depressing that you pulled it off that easily.
I couldn't find anything to say to the two of them. Sure, I'd started using magic around the age of 2, and I put some effort into expanding my mana capacity. But given how much I ended up with, I'd probably been born with an unnaturally large supply in the first place. I'd put in the effort, but I'd also just gotten lucky. That made it tricky to say much of anything about my abilities as a mage. In any case, I needed to stay focused for now. We weren't home yet, and my wives were exhausted. Once we were safely back, I'd have to give them both shoulder massages. We'd be skipping the nocturnal activities tonight also. We were all worn out.
Oh, look, Rudy, isn't that a pretty sunset?
I looked over to the west, where the sun was starting to sink below the horizon. The sky all around it was a brilliant shade of crimson. Nature was just as beautiful here as it was back in my old world. That was one thing that hadn't changed. Yeah, it's gorgeous. Was I supposed to tack on, but not as gorgeous as you there? With a small sigh, Sophie leaned against me slightly. She looked just about ready to doze off on the spot. We would probably be making it home before it got dark out, but I'd have to stay alert until we reached the city limits. These two couldn't use magic right now, so if any monsters popped out, I needed to deal with them.
You know, sometimes I find myself wondering if this is all a dream.
A dream?
That's right. Maybe I'm still trapped in that labyrinth, and this is a happy little delusion I'm seeing right before I die.
I kept my eyes scanning the area around us for threats, half listening to the conversation. Sylphie and Roxy were speaking slowly, fatigue evident in their voices.
I'm a lot happier right now than I was 6 months ago. I got married, for one thing, and I was hired as a professor at the university. I suppose I seem like something of an interloper to you, Sylphie, but I'm happy I'm here, riding this horse with both of you.
I'd felt Sylphie flinch a little when Roxy spoke the word interloper. Now she shook her head in denial.
You're not an interloper, Roxy. And I'm glad you've been so kind and considerate about all this. I don't think I'd win if you turned it into some sort of competition.
Sylphie's voice was so uncertain that I felt the need to interrupt with a hug at this point. She took one hand off the reins to pat my arm. It was her way of saying, I know.
I mean, I just got lucky. Really. I got to know Rudy when we were little, and then I ran into him again when he was really desperate for help. I never would have caught his attention otherwise.
I think you've being a bit too modest.
Well, I probably wouldn't even be here today if I hadn't met Rudy as a kid.
What do you mean?
He taught me magic when I was young, you know. It's the only thing that kept me alive.
Sylphie began to recount the story of her life after the displacement incident. She'd been unlucky enough to emerge high in the sky above the royal palace in Asura. By quickly casting a spell, she'd just barely managed to land safely. But at that moment, her hair lost its original color, possibly a side effect of spending too much mana in her terror. Princess Ariel had taken a personal liking to her, but it was her rare ability to cast spells silently that had earned her a place in the royal court. And when Ariel was outmaneuvered by her political rivals, that same ability had allowed Sylphie to fight off dozens of assassins as they fled. In the picture she painted, my magic was the only thing that had kept her alive through all of this.
Back when I was working as Princess Ariel's guardian mage, this one thought kept popping into my head. If I didn't know how to use magic, I'd probably be a slave right now.
As she spoke, I found myself wondering how different my own life would have been if I hadn't met Roxy or Sylphie when I was young. If not for Roxy, I wouldn't have found the courage to leave that house for you. I was confident of that much. If I'd never taken a step outside, never met Sylphie, could I have survived the displacement incident? Could I have made my way across the demon continent? Well, if I'd never met Sylphie, I wouldn't have ended up getting sent to the city of Roa, which meant I wouldn't have met Eris or Ghislaine. Maybe my parents would have shipped me off to school eventually. I would have hit a wall with my magic at some point, so I might have ended up asking them to send me to the Renoa University of Magic anyway. Under different circumstances, Paul might have approved instead of telling me to wait until I was 12. But of course, I wouldn't have found Sylphie waiting for me in Renoa. She wouldn't have followed me up here either. Maybe I would have ended up in the same class as Linya and Persina and fallen in love with one of them. When we graduated, I'd head back to the Great Forest and live among the beast folk. Well, no. The displacement incident would have taken place eventually, so I probably would have rushed back home to Asura. In any case, my life would have looked completely different. Still, I couldn't help feeling like I would have run into Sylphie somewhere, and fallen in love with her, of course. Yes, surely that was predestined by the laws of causality. Or just fate, if you prefer. Whatever.
My life changed completely the day I met Rudy. I mean, I did put in a lot of effort too, but I think I was lucky more than anything else. So when I see someone like you who changed Rudy's life for the better, and I know you both love each other, well, I don't really want him to lose that just because I'm around, I guess. I probably don't have the right to object. When I just got here first... Sorry, I don't know how to put this.
That's all right. I understand what you're trying to say, and I'm very happy you have such a high opinion of me.
I couldn't see Roxy's face since she was sitting up in front, but I could see that her shoulders were trembling slightly. I stretched my arms out and pulled both her and Sylphie into a hug.
Rudy!
Back in my old world, choosing Roxy would have meant losing Sylphie. And it could have worked out that way here if not for Sylphie's decision to forgive me. The only lucky person here was me. Given my less-than-ideal track record as a husband, promising that I'd cherish them forever would probably ring hollow. I'd just have to speak with my actions instead. Once we made it home that evening, I took some time to go over what I'd learned from the day's lesson on King Tier magic. Lightning was a tricky spell, but the basic concept was simple. You spread a huge amount of mana all across the sky, then concentrated it in one location and dropped it down on your target. Physically speaking, you created the storm clouds, then fired off a bolt of lightning. Simple as that. In retrospect, cumulonimbus and lightning were essentially two parts of a single spell. Its destructive power was the greatest of any spell I'd seen so far. That was only natural, though. I didn't know of any magic that demanded more raw mana than cumulonimbus, and lightning concentrated all of that energy into a single spot. Up until now, my fully charged stone cannon had been the most lethal spell in my arsenal, but this one might have surpassed it. With this many gigawatts at my fingertips, I could launch myself into the future if I wanted to. But seriously, though, although the name of this spell was lightning, the real secret behind its power lay in the mana compression step. I was curious if any king-tier spells in other disciplines might be applications of the same basic technique. In any case, now that I'd gotten through casting the spell once, I'd be able to use it silently in the future. The next time I used it, I was fairly sure I could speed up both the cloud formation and compression phases and drop the bolt of lightning much more quickly than before. But although I was planning to practice with it, I wasn't sure I'd get many chances to put this spell to practical use. After all, if I was up against a single target, my stone cannon was usually more than enough. Lightning was kind of an overkill spell, on the whole. It would be more useful if I could find a way to reduce its power. With this thought in mind, I started playing around a little on a much smaller scale. And after several failed experiments, I stumbled across a way to generate a strong electric current. The method involved silently casting a tiny cumulonimbus spell, compressing it, and firing off a lightning spell in the direction of my target. This resulted in a small, crackling bolt of electricity that could be directed with considerable accuracy. Its voltage seemed to be fairly low too, so the damage it did wasn't too excessive. I wasn't sure exactly how this worked, but it seemed like it might come in handy. It probably wasn't suitable for extremely close-range combat. You'd end up shocking yourself along with your target. On the bright side, it wasn't going to do any lasting damage. At worst, you'd be incapacitated for a time, but there were lots of other attack magic spells that didn't run the risk of hurting their own caster. Still, it felt worth trying to refine this. I could use a spell designed to stun someone instead of killing them. Lightning branches through the air to reach its target, so it will be impossible to avoid. And the shock might even be effective at disabling someone protected by a battle aura. I didn't have anyone to test that on at the moment, but if Barigari came back, I could ask him to be my guinea pig. If nothing else, it might be a nice surprise to pull out of my sleeve against a more powerful opponent. Incidentally, although this spell was just a tiny form of lightning, I decided to call it electric so I could distinguish between the two. What a productive day this had been. Legends of the University number 6. The boss has an electric personality. Chapter 7. The Wedding Ceremony. I'd been planning to sleep alone the night I became a Water King. This was mainly because Roxy and Sylphie were both tuckered out, so it didn't feel like the time for romance. I was pleasantly tired myself, but I knew I wouldn't be able to keep my hands to myself if I got into bed with either of them, so I decided we would all sleep in different rooms. When I mentioned this to Aisha, though, she insisted on sleeping with me herself. This sort of thing had happened plenty of times before. I never actively invited her, but when she asked to sleep with me, I never turned her down. There was no real reason to refuse, so I gave her my permission. Of course, this was going to be the strictly platonic kind of sleeping. As Aisha celebrated, though, I noticed that Norn was looking on with something that looked like envy in her eyes. Norn was already supposed to be staying over here tonight. Knowing her, though, there probably wasn't much point in suggesting that she join us. That was my assumption, at least, but when I threw the offer out there just to be polite, Norn actually took me up on it. I ended up sandwiched in between my sisters that night. Aisha was lying on my right and Norn took my left. Before long, they were snoring away with their heads resting on my arms. Aisha was one thing, but I was a bit perplexed that Norn had gone along with this. Her peaceful little face wasn't giving me any clues either. Maybe it was her way of telling me that she'd accepted me as a kind of substitute father. I trust you enough to sleep cuddled up against you or something like that. Maybe. I was pinned in place with my arms outstretched, but I felt profoundly happy in that moment. It was almost if I'd found a part of me that had been missing. Just as a bird needs 2 wings, perhaps a man needs 2 sisters on his arms. This thought gave rise to an idea that sent a jolt running down my spine. Man, I want to have a threesome with Sylphie and Roxy. It was the voice of the devil, no doubt, whispering these words into my ear. Some evil snake, its tongue flickering around suggestively, was trying its best to lead me astray. I couldn't let myself continue thinking about this. In theory, it was something I'd been interested in for many years. But in practice, I had no idea how I'd even begin the conversation. They both loved me, but that didn't mean they'd be comfortable with a request like that. I could take no for an answer, of course, but what if even asking them destroyed our relationship? I didn't think that was likely, but I couldn't help worrying about it. It wasn't like I was dissatisfied with our current arrangement. I was spending alternate nights with 2 very beautiful women after all. What's more, I was in love with both of them. One had already given me a child. What did I have to complain about? Nothing, that's what. That said, I did want to try sleeping with both of them at once. Part of it was that they both approached it so differently. Sophie was a bit on the submissive side. As a general rule, she did anything I asked her to in bed. When I suggested we try something new, she'd often lower her eyes anxiously, but she never objected. That's not to say she was a dead fish, though. Once we actually got started, she always enjoyed herself. Within a couple minutes, she'd be gasping for air and clinging to me desperately. It was obvious how much she wanted to please me, and it was adorable. Roxy, on the other hand, was something of a technician. She was constantly making use of the things she learned from Elenilis, trying to increase her skills. When I asked her to try something, she'd give some thought to the best way to do it. When I offered to do something myself, she'd make all sorts of suggestions. Given the difference in our sizes, we had some physical challenges to overcome, but she was creative and hardworking enough to find ways around them. And that was just as adorable in its own way. Sylphie was the indulgent type, and Roxy was an experimenter. They were both wonderful. I didn't prefer one over the other. It was possible I'd eventually start enjoying my time with one of them more, but even then, I wasn't planning to neglect the other. My intention was to treat them as equally as I possibly could. Right? I loved both of them equally. So was it really that wrong to think about sleeping with both of them at once? Surely the answer was no. Any red-blooded man has some interest in such things. It's simply in our nature. However, that didn't mean I was going to voice these thoughts. Sometimes it's wisest to keep your more extreme desires to yourself if you want to maintain healthy relationships. This was the very reason I'd never let myself bring this up before. As of this moment, at least, I was confident that wasn't going to change. The next morning, I headed over to Cliff's laboratory. Cliff's research was focused on the development of magical implements specifically, ones capable of counteracting curses. He'd insisted that I was welcome to drop in on him at any time, but whenever I dropped by, I made sure to listen carefully at the door. Depending on the noises I heard from inside, I sometimes had to turn around and leave. Today, there didn't seem to be anything problematic going on in there, so I knocked on the door.
Come in. The door's open.
I stepped into the laboratory to find Eleanor sitting by the far window. She was resting her cheek on her hand and gazing out at the street, her long curly hair glimmering in the sun. The woman sure was picturesque when she wasn't talking, but I knew her too well to be impressed. She was probably thinking unspeakably dirty thoughts. "Are you the only one home, Eleanor?"
That's right.
Cliff was very busy these days and hadn't been making much progress on his research. We'd been talking for months about finding the time to improve his existing prototypes using the stones of absorption, but it still hadn't happened yet.
Cliff's off working on the wedding preparations again?
That right there was one of the major reasons. Cliff and Eleanor were getting married soon.
But he's determined to do it all himself.
Try not to hold it against him. Men can be prideful about these things, you know? Before we left for the Begarit continent, Cliff had promised Eleanor he'd marry her when we returned. When we made it back, though, he hadn't even begun to prepare yet. That wasn't his fault by any means. We told him we might be gone for 2 years, but we ended up making it back in 6 months. It would have been odd to find him ready and waiting. However, Cliff was the kind of guy who took his promises seriously. With remarkable focus and stubbornness, he'd gotten everything arranged over the last few months. First and foremost, he'd found them a place to live, bought the furniture, and planned out everything they needed to move in. For the most part, he handled all of this on his own, although I'd helped out a bit with the real estate hunt. Unlike me, he wasn't interested in buying a house. He'd eventually settled on renting an apartment in the student district. If it ever got too cramped for them, he figured they could just move to a bigger place. I was a bit surprised by that attitude, considering Cliff was something of a show-off by nature. But on the other hand, he wasn't swimming in cash at the moment, so it was perfectly reasonable. He couldn't have purchased a pricey home. Not without financial help from Eleanor, at least. I knew she was pretty well off. Oh, and on that note, congratulations, Eleanor. They were in the final stages now. The wedding was scheduled for next month. Something about Eleanor's wearing a pure white dress felt slightly out of character, but as long as the two of them were happy, that was all that really mattered. You mind if I wait around until Cliff comes back?
Not at all.
Eleanor was keeping up her side of the conversation, but she hadn't even looked in my direction yet. And now, still gazing out the window, she let out a long, deep sigh. It was the kind of sigh that came with its own subtitles. I'm so very troubled. Won't anyone ask me what's wrong? Are you having second thoughts about the marriage or anything?
Oh, of course not. Cliff's so sweet and devoted that I almost feel like I don't deserve him. I couldn't be happier that we're getting married.
Fair enough. I was only a spectator here, but as fair as I could tell, Cliff was nothing but loving and loyal to Eleanor. That's not to say that he was a perfect person. He had plenty of flaws, but he was still a young man, not even 20 years old yet, in fact. When you took his potential for future growth into consideration, the guy was a real catch. So why do you keep sighing then?
Isn't it obvious?